Ready?
All set.
This meeting will now come to order. This is the September... You all set with the public TV? You're good to go? Okay. This is the September 13th, 2011 meeting of the Fairfield Town Plan and Zoning Commission. I call the meeting to order. We're going to begin with executive session. The first item is bills and communications. Meeting minutes from our last meeting, August 23rd, 2011. Is there a motion? Commissioner Kennelly has moved. Is there a second? Thank you. Commissioner Wagner has seconded. Are there any additions, deletions, or corrections to the minutes? Hearing none, all in favor of the minutes as submitted signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed? Abstention? Item carries, and the minutes are approved unanimously. Next item, 176-186 Linwood Avenue is a special exception application of Honda Westport Incorporated to establish an automobile service facility in an existing building in a design industrial district. Public hearing was August 23rd, 2011. The expiration date is October 27th, 2011. On this will be all of the regular commissioners, as well as Commissioner Alessi and Commissioner Parker. Commissioner, I should note, Owens is off. She was absent that day. So it's LeClaire, Barrett, Kennelly, Suter, Wagner, Alessi, and Parker.
On the minutes?
No, on old business.
On old
Linwood.
business, okay.
Yeah. Is there any motion on 176-186 Linwood Avenue?
I'll move to approve it.
Commissioner Barrett has moved to approve. Is there a second?
I'll second.
Commissioner Suter has seconded.
Just outline the findings for you. If you remember, again, this hearing last time, this is an application of the Honda Westport under our Section 27 regulations to establish an automobile service facility at the property located at 176-186 Linwood Avenue. The subject property, as you know, is located in the design industrial zone, and pursuant to our Section 2131, automobile repair facilities are permitted there, again, subject to securing a special exception. And I'll get into the findings and some other comments in just a second. Just a brief description of the use, other than just a straight description of it being an auto repair place. Hours of operation will be between 7:30 a.m. and 6 p.m., Monday through Friday, Saturday from 7:30 a.m. to 4:30 p.m. As shown on the plans that were submitted, the facility will provide 33 service bays for customer service and new vehicle prep inside the building warehouse. Currently also on the property, as you know, there's an indoor soccer facility, which is at the easterly portion of the same building. The proposal provides control signals and pavement parkings to be installed, managing the site traffic, and I'll get into that a little more specifically, what is being recommended by the traffic report, and also what the findings would have to be. Landscaping plan was submitted, and as far as the traffic report, again, the proposal is a reuse of existing and partially vacant commercial building. The proposal is to modify the building to provide the 33 bays, also with a parts department and waiting area for customers. If you remember now, the building itself would be modified to provide 2 entrance lanes to the service area and vehicle queuing lanes from the front of the building to Linwood Avenue. A separate exit drive for the building would be provided directly to Linwood Avenue. In addition to the entrance to the service, the existing parking area will be designated for Honda vehicles, customer and staff. The vehicles waiting for service and new vehicle storage will be placed on the site. All right, now, at Linwood Avenue in North Pine Creek, it was announced there is a site distance restriction for motorists exiting Linwood Avenue. And this is due, as you know, to a narrow roadway underpass by Metro North Bridge. The recommendations of the report is that appropriate intersection warning signs be provided and maintained there, be considered for reducing the speed in both directions on North Pine Creek Road at the underpass, with warning signs of a 15-mile-per-hour limit. It also recommended that along the site frontage, a solid white shoulder line be installed along the entire front of the site to separate the perpendicular parking spaces and paved areas on the travel lanes, from the travel lane Linwood Avenue. On the site, it is recommended also that appropriate traffic control signing and pavement markings be installed to direct motorists to appropriate lanes for service center parking and driveways. Parking for the indoor soccer facility should be clearly marked and separated from the Honda Westport Service Center area. Those are the kind of recommendations that were made in the report. Now, as you know, under Section 27.4, we have some conditions of approval. In this particular instance, they would include 27.4.1, of course, our harmony with the neighborhood requirement, 27.4.2, adequate access for fire protection. That was the brief description about that. 27.43 and 27.481, provisions for entering and leaving the premises to be such matter that no traffic hazards are created. I already mentioned that a landscaping plan was submitted, but our 27.44 indicates that the commission must determine there's an adequate landscaping plan proposed. And then as far as specifically for the automotive use itself, 27.483, no repair work except an emergency nature is to be performed out of doors. And 27.485, no more than 5 vehicles awaiting repair work or having been repaired cannot be stored on the lot out of doors unless suitably screened. Now, the only other thing that was mentioned that wasn't actually part of the formal traffic report, but there was a discussion during the hearing about the entrance itself, that there may be a possibility, or at least that their traffic engineer felt there was enough width on Lewitt Avenue to widen that exit so that you could make better the line of sight and along with some markings for that intersection. So that essentially, Mr. Chairman, was what submitted to the public hearing.
Thank you, Mr. Devanshi. Is there any discussion of this item by any member of the commission? Commissioner Suter.
Yeah, I think it's a very well thought out application, and the traffic report in particular was very helpful by suggesting a number of conditions that we could impose on the approval of this application should we choose to approve it. Some of them the applicant can do, some of them the town would have to do, and I suppose our role would be to suggest or recommend to the town that they take the steps such as putting the long white border between the parking and drive area of the Honda dealership and the street itself, so to clearly delineate the separation between the two. And I think that's very important because of the long, very long curb cut in front of this particular building. The parking seems to be adequate and has been thought out, and the internal directional arrows and stop bars and so forth, and any guidance to separate both the Honda dealership traffic and the soccer facility traffic, I think are important and well thought out and should be required. I think it does meet the requirements of the special exception section or regulations in toto, and that we should approve it.
Thank you. Is there any discussion by any other member, Commission? Commissioner Barrett?
I would agree with pretty much everything Mr. Suter said. I think it's a good use of the site. I thought it was a good application. It's a good building for this use. I think all the applicant's traffic recommendations should be part of our conditions for approval, all those recommendations. I like the idea of separating the uses clearly, and I think they went through that, how it would be separate between the soccer and that the parking the physical location of the entrances would tend to accomplish that. My biggest concern about this is the exiting and just the traffic that's going to be generated at certain times, because it's not much. It's not a huge traffic generator, but just a lot of cars leaving in the morning and the afternoon coming out of there. I mean, that's a tough exit. I've gone out of there. I use the soccer facility a lot, and it's very difficult to get out, to make a turn. Most of the people turning, I think, out are going to be turning right, which is towards the post road, which I guess is okay because that way you've got to be looking to the left where you can see. But then if you're turning left, the people are coming on. Not everybody's turning into that facility, and people are rushing up North Pine Creek. So whatever can be done to mitigate that intersection, I think needs to be done, because it's not of the applicant's making, but it's a dangerous intersection. Just adding that concentration of traffic concerns me at those hours.
Yes.
I'm not going
Commissioner Kennelly.
Thanks, Mr. Chairman. I'm not going to be supporting this item. My concern is Section 27.4.1. That the development of the structure should be in harmony with and conform to the appropriate and orderly development of the town and the neighborhood, and not hinder or discourage appropriate development and use of adjacent property or impair its value. Why am I concerned? Well, obviously, anytime you get a tax-paying client, customer in the town at a site that's not being all that isn't being used, of course, especially during a deep recession, we welcome it. But under questioning, the applicant noted for us, I think it was Commissioner Alessi who asked the question, or myself, how many bays were there at Honda Westport? Answer, 7. How many bays here? 33. Now, why am I concerned about this? Now, I understand, I think, what's been said by the previous commissioners about this, what can be done to mitigate on the streets, things be done. But at the end of the day, this is a cork in an old-fashioned glass, as they used to say. It's 2 pounds of bologna in a 1-pound bag. No one is expecting, at least according to the applicant, that all 33 bays are going to be used. But certainly, at the very least, half that capacity is likely to be used. And that is 120 of 150% more being used at Honda of Westport. We asked the applicant at the time, what's going to go on? How will things be scheduled? One of the commissioners at that point, I thought I overheard them said, Honda of Westport gets the showroom, we get the service facility. Now, my concern about this is that where are these cars going to be coming from? Well, you can purchase your vehicle in Honda of Westport, but you may be from Trumbull or Easton or Weston or a whole host of other places right outside of Fairfield. And where are you going to come? You're going to end up working your way through our streets, off of 95, off of the Merritt, and working your way to Linwood Avenue. To me, that's a real concern. I'm not in this business, but it strikes me that if you have your choice between taking your dealership, which has 7 bays, and an off-site service center that has 33, where are you going to do most of your service work, and where are you going to do your new vehicle prep? You're going to do it at the dealership. So what's going to happen? The 7 bays that are now mostly being used for service in addition to new dealer prep may do more new dealer prep, and more of that will go to where there's 33 bays. So this is my concern. This is not an administrative application. We're being asked here to grant a special, to make a choice here, when you're asked to do a special exception. So it's not just a matter of, does everything fit on the site? Is there enough sight lines? It's a matter of what will happen to the neighborhood. And my view is, when you're inviting these folks to come in here and to have not 2 times the capacity they have in Westport, not 3 times the capacity they have in Westport, not 4, but almost 5 times, I think you're asking for a lot of congestion, a lot more cars on our streets, probably a lot more cars on our streets that may be from out of town. So for me, it fails on 27.4.1, and I hope other commissioners will join me now.
Commissioner Wagner.
Thank you. Respectfully, I disagree with Commissioner Keneally. I don't think that a lot of what you just said is relevant to our consideration of the application. The fact is that we have a site which is appropriate for the use that has been applied for, and I echo the comments of the other commissioners. The notion that we'll have additional traffic coming into Fairfield from surrounding towns, that's not necessarily a bad thing. And I don't believe that we should be thinking about congestion on the Post Road when we're considering an application for Linwood Avenue. So I support the application for the reasons that were expressed previously, and I don't think that the considerations that you just mentioned are relevant to the application.
Commissioner Alessi.
The only thing I'd like this panel to look at is the client stated that he will be making deliveries at night. We're going to have trucks going through the residential area 7, 8 o'clock at night, dropping stuff off and picking stuff up, because the only way to access that site is through the residential neighborhood, considering they can't get under that overpass. So I'm a little hesitant just on that fact to approve this, to have, school kids out 6, 7 o'clock at night. It hasn't been determined as to what time these trucks are going to be coming, and that's the only access into that property.
Commissioner Wagner.
Yeah, I believe we did address that at the hearing. It was not one of the points that was in the summary, but the applicant did state that they would limit the times for delivery to reasonable hours, and that they wouldn't allow deliveries after a certain point in time, and that they would be amenable to, you know, whatever reasonable restriction that we would impose on that as a condition for allowance. So, you know, I think that we should do that. Further, the applicant said that the deliveries did not require anybody to be present at the location, that they have this lockbox system where the delivery men have access to a secure area. They come in, they drop off, and they leave. So, you know, I would leave it open to debate as to what time, you know, we should fix for that condition. You know, is that 6 p.m., is it 7 p.m., is it 8 p.m.? You know, I'm amenable to, you know, any of those, but I think we can fix that.
Well, I think Mr. Commissioner Lacy made the point that the earlier hours are difficult and the children might be out playing, so maybe 6 is not, maybe 6 is a little early if we're going to fix the time.
Yeah, I think I'm sure, go ahead.
Yeah. As to deliveries, I don't know any automobile repair facility that works past 5 o'clock, and it seems to me that all deliveries, if they had to be made after working hours, would be made shortly after working hours. So it seems to me we could even impose a restriction of 6 o'clock if that made sense for the commission. And secondly, I don't believe the traffic on Linwood Avenue would increase that much. The traffic report says it'll be 52 to 72 trip ends per day. And the traffic report also says that Linwood Avenue has an extremely low traffic volume. And I've been on that avenue, and I agree with that assessment. It's a very quiet street. So I don't think the increase in traffic is going to be that great. As to the intersection problem, I think the traffic report's suggestion that we recommend to the town that they change the speed zone around that bridge and intersection to 15 miles an hour is a good one, and then appropriate warning signs would be very helpful. So that's my additional observations on the application.
Look,
Commissioner Kennelly.
here's the thing. I've said this before. No one brings any development where they say that will be 10,000 more cars. Okay? This idea that something's not relevant or not, yeah, I suppose in a situation where we're talking about some specific particular item on the site. But what we're being asked to do in this case with special exception is use our legislative function to grant an exception that has a far-reaching long-term impact. You know, as a commissioner here many years ago said very wisely, make sure you're putting on your planning hat before you put on your zoning hat. So it's very easy to look at this stuff strictly through the lens of zoning, which is, does it fit the rule like a geometric theorem? We also have to look at this kind of a thing from a planning perspective, and that's specifically why 27.4.1 is in our regulations. It's not so that we can carefully construct what might fit. It's what's good for the surrounding neighborhood and the town. Now, Commissioner Alessi wisely points out that you're going to have now significant truck traffic in this area. This is a commercial zone, a commercial area. Commercial can be a lot of different things. Industrial can be a lot of different things. But here, we're going to have car-intensive, truck-intensive use of this area. As for the traffic study, of course, no doubt, when things are based on levels of service, okay, when statistical evidence is provided based on levels of service, yes, of course, it's going to be very difficult to have any one development take the levels from A to D or F ever. I mean, you truly would have to be proposing something huge. But I would just say that when you look at this kind of a use, and you see it's going to be truck intensive and car intensive in a residential neighborhood, what is the impact not just on how long it takes you, an extra 15 seconds, 18 seconds, 23 seconds at a stop sign, whatever it might be, but what is the impact on people walking and jogging? Every one of us talks about how we want to maintain the character of Fairfield. Maintain the character of Fairfield? Oh, it's great. Westport has 7 bays. We'll have 33. Linwood Avenue will have 33 bays. Ooh, let's put it right in. It's relevant that this is going to be a large car and truck intensive development of this site. And whether you get a report done by the applicant that tells you, oh, no, 15 more seconds out this stop sign. What about the guy jogging when the truck comes through? What about the kid playing? So we're making a special exception to this. And so to me, it's very relevant to look at what the impact is in the surrounding neighborhood. That's why it's in the regs. And I hope you'll reconsider that.
Yeah, this is, here's my comments. I live closest, as most of you know, to this area. I walk there every day with the dog. I just walk in the neighborhood or drive by many times a day. And as much as I'd like I'm kind of on the fence. As much as I'd love a Honda dealer there, since all of my cars are Hondas, and it'd be really convenient for me to walk home when I come off for service. It would save me a lot of trips to Westport to get them fixed. A couple of issues that jump out. The first is, obviously, Linwood has got sightline problems pulling out of Linwood onto North Pine Creek. So I think we need to really look at how that's relined, or what we request regarding relining that to try to widen the eastbound lane if we're going to approve this, to make it as easy as possible to pull out. The bigger thing I wrestle with is the North Pine Creek truck access to this and the traffic access. The first thing that I'm concerned about is frankly, if I look at the drawings, they've got 7 spots for service advisors. That's a lot of people to be writing up orders. You've got 7 of those desks, plus a supervisor's desk, plus a cashier, plus a parts counter, and 33 bays. Yet we're told they're only going to have 23 to 25 people working there. Now that may be true, there's 23 to 25 today, but business goes well, people start servicing their cars there, it's 35 next year, then it's 45, whatever the number turns out to be. Once we approve this, if we don't limit it to the number of people or the number of operational bays, the space is there. They've drawn in 7 service advisor bays. They've drawn in 33 car bays. They can fill them up with people if business goes that well, which greatly increases the traffic numbers. Those cars are either going to come in from the post road, or they're going to have to come in down through a residential neighborhood. They're going to come up Umpqua, either drive through Bradley to North Pine Creek, or take Umpqua to Sturgis, or Mill Plain Green, or Mill Plain to Sturgis to North Pine Creek. And those are streets where those kids all walk to both the middle and the high school. They're all walkers. There's no buses to any schools there. And there's schools where the bus stops are on North Pine Creek. There's one at Linwood for the kids that go to Riverfield, and there's another bus there for the kids that go to the middle school. Anyone north of Linwood walks to the middle school and to the high school. Henderson and Bradley have bus stops, one on Bradley for a short bus. Henderson and North Pine Creek have a bus stop for Riverfield. There's one further up on North Pine Creek, I believe. You have a lot of kids walking in the area, and the truck's concerned because a trailer truck can't come down North Pine Creek successfully, because when they try to make the turn coming in from Sturgis to a left on North Pine Creek, there's an island, a gardened island in the middle. They can't make the turn without either driving over the island completely or knocking the fence on the other side. Means they've got to come over Bradley, and Bradley is a residential street with a 90-degree dogleg in the corner, where it makes a 90-degree turn to the right when you're coming in, to the left you're leaving. So that becomes an issue with the trailers or any trucks. We've really got to restrict the times if we're going to do that, to keep those trucks off. But the other concern is that bothers me is the drawing, and that's why I raised it. I counted 33 bays, and I said 33 mechanics, plus advisors, plus cashiers, plus supervisors that don't work on your car. Anyone who goes to a car dealer knows there's a lot of hands that don't touch your car when you go in, whether it's the parts guys or the detailing gentlemen or whatever. Yet we're told 23 to 25, which is what the traffic report, I think, is based on. That's a little bit of a concern I have, that this works out and business is great, that the capacity increases because the roads handle it. Is this in conformity? I don't know how to rectify that. I'm on the fence with that right now. As much as this may be a design industrial, how do we deal with that issue? Commissioner Barretts.
Yes, that design industrial is one key thing I wanted to mention too. Mr. Kennelly brings up this special exception. It's a special exception because in the design industrial regs, there are a number of permitted uses. This is a permitted use, but subject to getting a special exception. So that's why it's here for a special exception. Because the regs require that it meets those standards, as Mr. Kennelly accurately points out, plus it's a permitted use. Point here is it's a design industrial. When we have these uses all over town, when an applicant comes to us with a permitted use, there is something to be said for that. If we don't want to allow this type of use there, maybe we should make it a residential district or something, because it is a permitted use. As far as truck traffic, I'm really not sure from the applicant's position how much it's going to generate. I mean, we're talking about deliveries of parts for this facility, right? I mean, that's what's being delivered here. They're not selling cars. We're not talking about truck, car carriers dropping off. It's deliveries. Also, Mr. Suter said there would be soon after, and not to disagree with you, sir, but I think they represented that they would have a drop-off, like a lockbox type area where people could drop off at all hours. It didn't have to be staffed for them to drop off. So that could happen during the night. Again, I'm not sure if that's good or bad or whatever, but when we get into hours of operation for drop-off, that might be something we try to regulate. That's a little difficult to do so. Yes, Mr. Wagner? I'm sorry, I shouldn't be calling out of the...
Mr. Vice Chairman,
I think
let me just respond. I just want to jump in. Matt, I want to give you a chance, but I just want to respond to that. Look, I absolutely hear you, Seth, and I apologize if I get a little over the top of this. It's just, here's the thing. There's probably a whole bunch of places in town where we have regulations that we haven't really thought ahead about what the impact is. And here's the thing. Industrial uses, for a long time, meant just that. An industrial site surrounded by a neighborhood, the industrial site was part of the neighborhood. People sort of, in some cases, especially on the side of town where I live, closer to Bridgeport, the factory, the shop, was part of the neighborhood. The classic example of this is the conversion of the industrial site where Whole Foods is. The neighborhood around there, those folks lived with that industrial site. They worked there. The leaving and going from those sites was shift-based. What we're talking about really now, and this is why this is in the regs, this harmony statute, which I know is very broad and all, and we can get a long debate about what constitutes harmony, but it's that very discussion we're having, the struggle that you're having, Mr. Chairman, about this, is on that concept of harmony. Because the reason it's there is that previous commissions who wrote these regs realized that there was going to be this transition, where the kind of old-style industrial use with predictable traffic and all the rest might change. And now what do you have? You have what's essentially really more of a commercial use. This is essentially an accessory to a commercial business. As somebody said, Westport has the dealership, we have the service center 5 times what's at Westport. What I'm concerned about is this neighborhood has the protection of, is it going to harmonize? Well, is a residential neighborhood going to be harmonized by having trucks coming through? I mean, it's great that trucks can come in anytime they want. Guy shows up with his parts at 11 p.m. Great, I guess the folks in that neighborhood will have to deal with when the truck shows up and drops off the parts. People stopping off to drop their car off with a lockbox and leave it in the parking lot, I guess they'd have to deal with that as well. But is that what we want? Is that harmony for those folks? My answer is no, and that's why 27.4.1 has the harmony test in it. Look, I have 2 Hondas, terrific cars, and I'd love not to schlep to Westport. But what I'm concerned about here is the size and scope of what's being proposed. If they had presented us with a 7-bay or 10-bay little facility that fit the neighborhood reasonably and stuff, but this to me has the earmarks of something significantly larger than what's in Westport and what Westport would have tolerated. And, to me, I'm very surprised that, why isn't this in Westport? That's a question I would ask. The answer to me is that I imagine that you couldn't find a place to plug this into Westport. So why are we in such a rush to say, that sounds great, let's have that here? We'll have to drive a couple miles further to get service, but my concern is the harmony here. And the harmony test is in this because, yes, it is a permitted use, but there is this transition from what was traditional industrial to what's something much less like that. The factory was part of the neighborhood. This is not, no one in this neighborhood is likely to be working here. And most of these are going to be cars from outside, and it's going to change the character of the neighborhood. I don't think anyone here can say this isn't going to change the character of that neighborhood. This many cars, trucks, whenever they want to show up.
Commissioner Alessi, then Commissioner.
Now, Mr. Chairman, you brought up a good point. You just named 5 or 6 bus stops. And there's going to be people coming from whether it be Stratfield or Greenfield Hill or all those northern sections of town that are going to cut through that residential area. The wife's going to be following them because they're going to drop off their car. So now we have 2 cars, and then they're going to zip back to maybe get to the train station or work or wherever you have to go. And I think you just hit the nail right on the head. At 7 o'clock, 7:30 in the morning, there are going to be kids out there. And we're going to have a lot of cars coming from the north end of town that are going to go there for service. And we're going to have a bunch of kids, whether they be walking to school, standing on the bus stop, walking to the bus stops, and it's going to cause a major problem. Not only the trucks, but the car traffic that this is going to incur on that neighborhood.
Commissioner Wagner and then Commissioner.
Thanks. I won't belabor the point too much, but it's a designed industrial district. And to have a service center is probably a heck of a lot better than having a factory. And I don't know where you can possibly come up with a presumption that nobody in these neighborhoods is going to be working at this facility. Frankly, I'd like to think just the opposite. I'd like to think that it represents an opportunity for people in the area to be working at this facility. Maybe, perhaps not, immediately, but it's an opportunity. The lockbox thing, the applicant stated no truck carriers, car carriers, no 18-wheelers. They said it was the traditional sort of 10-wheel delivery trucks. This is not large parts coming in, with 18-wheelers all the time, and that the lockbox was there to make deliveries, once in the morning and once in the evening, and we can put a time restriction on that. So I think that it's a designed industrial district. It's a good use for the property. It creates opportunities, and I think that we're taking the potential impacts a little out of proportion. So I think we should support this. And why is it drawn to the size that it is? Because the land is the size that it is. It's a big piece of property. So
Yeah, I'm sure. You don't.
so yeah.
Yeah, I'm sure. Listen to this. Yeah, why are the 33 bays there? Because they're like, well, hey, you know what? Got this nice big chunk where I can put in 33 bays, where I can only do 7 in Westport. Look, yeah, it's not industrial, but nobody expects tomorrow someone's going to build a smokestack factory with, with plumes of, hot ash going out. That's ridiculous. We've got a lot of these, or not a lot, but we have several of these sites that are industrial. I'll give you a great example of an industrial site that was going to be converted. Think of that site we have where the Sportsplex is now, over by the rec center.
Fairprint.
Yeah, right. That's just near your neighborhood too, Mr. Chairman. Originally, my first meeting here, when I was in 2007, when I joined the commission, the developer came in and wanted to put in office and residential. Now, I love the idea of residential near the train station. That'll warm Commissioner Parker's heart. That I think that's I think that's density by mass transit. It's a great thing. And office, by gosh, at the time it was 2007. It seemed like things were going to be great, but they were looking to build at the time. The developer, the applicant, wanted to basically build another kind of sort of extended exit ramp off of 95 to shoot down Mill Plain to feed this thing. Now, I was in the first meeting of my time on the commission, and I railed against this idea. I thought it was terrible because of what it was going to do to the impact it was going to have on the surrounding neighborhood related to cars. Now, what did we get instead? It was rejected, and instead now we have the Sportsplex. So the Sportsplex was a use of an industrial property, not a new factory, but instead we said no. We said, whoa, this is too many cars, this may be too many trucks. This is going to change the character of the neighborhood. That's why 27.4.1's there. So we said, no, let's hold back. What did the developer do? The developer came back with Sportsplex in this case. Now, you have a terrific use. Now, I've been a huge supporter of that. I've been, every step of the way, as my fellow commissioners know, I've pushed. I'm not an anti-development person, but we can't, if it's Mexico City, that planning and zoning commission can say, sure, we'll take anything. But why are we in such a rush to say yes to something Westport doesn't want? Westport's TP&Z is protecting the character of its community. We ought to be doing the same thing. And especially, when you think about those kids who are going to be traveling. My kids, often walk to school. They're bus riders, but they'll take I wouldn't want them walking through trucks coming through and people in the morning coming with their wife behind to try to drop off the car and make the train. We don't have to say yes to this. This isn't an administrative approval. This isn't some Pansy Road, sort of Damocles holding over our head, okay? We have to think about it. What's the right use here? We have these industrial properties, but do these industrial properties have to be used? And, oh, I'll take it off your hands. I just want to put I want to put 33 bays in. I want to bring in trucks. No, the kids will walk through them. Well, we'll restrict the time. What time will they come in? We restrict it so they'll come in just during when school isn't going on the trucks? I don't think so. That isn't going to happen. So,
Mr. Parker?
Well, my comment, again, he addressed to some extent, and that is the fact that right across the street we have the Sportsplex, and we have a lot of cars generated from that and coming out, and again, the presence of young children in the neighborhood. And there was one day when I was on the post road, and I saw about 4 young boys from the Sportsplex playing on the railroad tracks, and I got somewhat alarmed by that and called the police and got them over there to get the kids off. And so, I mean, I think it's not your ordinary neighborhood, and with the Sportsplex and with the soccer arrangement here, I think we sort of envision this area being a recreation area. Again, in terms of planning, I mean, that would be my ideal for this area rather than to introduce something as traffic intensive as a car.
And Commissioner Wagner, and then back to
Thank
Commissioner
you.
Kennelly.
Thank you. I just want to do just one thing that Mr. Kennelly just mentioned. I don't believe that there's anything in the record to support that this was first presented to Westport and that Westport rejected it because they are preserving the character of their community, and that's why it's coming to Fairfield. So I think that's without foundation.
Point taken. I obviously am just saying, that's a rhetorical flourish that I withdraw. But I would say that maybe they didn't even think of bringing it to the TP&Z in Westport because they would have been run out of town on a rail if they tried. Now,
So I suggested Westport doesn't have service bays in that town?
they have 7. We're going to get 33. I just want to say
Have you
this.
seen Toyota of Westport?
One at a time, gentlemen.
Look, again, I understand completely. We look at this, we say, hey, a good paying car. I don't want to run down Honda Westport. They're terrific. I have no negative feelings. My car gets serviced there. I'm 1,000%. I gladly hear we're on television. Very positive, great. I don't think they have any nefarious reasons for what they're doing. They want to find a good site. There's nothing good for them. But I'm saying that it's not our job to say all the time yes to this. Commissioner Parker made a good point. There is traffic out that's generated, for example, by the Sportsplex, but it was a complementary kind of traffic. And what I mean is that the traffic that had been proposed by the developer, the same developer who eventually came up with Sportsplex, was going to be office traffic. So we're all going to come to that station, Fairfielders were going to come, and then all these traffic was going to come off 95. And you know what? There was terrific traffic recommendations. Oh, don't worry, it'll be fine. It'll be insignificant. In the end, the commission said no. But the traffic that's at Sportsplex is complementary in that nobody's going to those activities at the same time the commuters are hitting, for the most part, the intensities in after school times and in the weekends and play times like that. It's a better fit for the traffic. There is value. There's going to be a need for cars getting places and stuff. But clearly what Commissioner Alessi said is, and rightly so, is folks are going to be using that site. They're going to be really 2 cars because they're going to be following, if they drop somebody off, they're going to be trying to go places in the morning, go places in the evening, oftentimes commuting. So that's, to me, not going to be very complementary traffic in the neighborhood, especially when you have a lot of kids there.
Mr. Suter?
Yeah.
Trying to remember which one of you had your hand up first. It was
Yes,
Commissioner
sir.
Suter.
Okay.
Thank you.
Right. Well, I think the comments of some of the commissioners and their concerns about traffic coming from the northern part of town and invading the neighborhood around this particular location and children at bus stops and walking in the area are well-intentioned and thoughtful, but I think they're also basically speculative. And I think we have to focus on the fundamentals of the application, which are the traffic report, which indicates that the traffic will be low and not a problem, especially if we implement all the improvements suggested by the traffic report. And secondly, by the fact that it is an industrial zone and this auto service facility, even though it has a large number of bays, will be a definite improvement on any kind of a factory that could be put there, whether high-tech or low-tech, and is in fact in harmony with the neighborhood because it is an industrial zone. It'll be an improvement in the particular area and a good use of the existing building. So I think this application has a lot of merit and should be approved.
Commissioner Barrett?
I'll go very quickly, and not to belabor the point or to get any back and forth about the zone, but an industrial is just a word. A zone is defined by its uses. The biggest distinction of industrial zone is that office and retail are not permitted, and certain things are, and this is one of them. I think the use, it would be a convenience for Fairfield residents. We're speculative about where they'll come from or who will drive from where, I don't know, but Fairfield residents own Hondas, and this will be easier for them to get to. Even Mr. Leclerc conceded that. I also own a Honda, so does Mr. Kennelly. We're a big Honda commission here, right?
Right.
I just bought a car.
There you go.
About the deliveries, I'm not really sure what limitations we could put on that. I'd be amenable to putting some conditions on deliveries. My biggest concern is with the other thing about there's not necessarily the traffic generated, but the traffic generated and the sightline issues and potential hazard at that intersection. That is my biggest concern with this application, that I'd like to see any conditions overcome. I really don't have a problem with the use. I think also, in terms of traffic, it is a complementary use in terms of the other one that's there, the indoor soccer facility. Those hours are complementary. So I'm inclined to support the application with, concerns about the intersection.
Can I just went to the speculative? Just the one. There's
Well,
one
I just
word.
want to say two quick things. One is, I think we do have to do something with delivery. If you look at your conditions, the police department raised that as their only issue on this, the fact that there was delivery trucks in a residential neighborhood, and they note that in their conditions. Sergeant Perez notes we should look at that. And the second is just to remind the commission that the North Pine Creek Road access for ingress and egress, I should say, from Sportsplex has been restricted. You can only enter it from the Post Road direction by making a right turn in. You cannot come down the residential neighborhood and make a left turn in. Likewise, when you leave the Sportsplex, should you go out on North Pine Creek, the way we configured the driveway and restricted it, you cannot make a right turn into the residential neighborhood. You have to make a left towards Linwood and down towards the Post Road. So that's a limited access, to remind you, Commissioner. The Commissioner Kennelly with his final thoughts.
Absolutely, Mr. Chairman, and I thank you for your patience and your latitude. I want to say that no one has greater respect in this commission for the legal mind of Douglas Suter than I do. He is superb as a commissioner, and he, as always, reminds me again and again how crucial it is that we act in a manner that never can be interpreted as arbitrary. And I think that's absolutely true. So when he uses a term like speculative, I'm the first one to be sort of taken back by that, because I ask myself, oh my gosh, am I being speculative? Well, here's the thing. When we're performing our planning function, we must speculate. We must sort of project into the future to think about what the larger impact will be going forward. Are we being arbitrary? If we're being arbitrary, then we could look at that area and say, well, where did we say yes to this sort of development that might be troublesome on the issues related to cars and trucks and things like that, or traffic? And the answer is Sportsplex is an example of that. So we have precedent in the last few years right in the area where we said, no, even though the traffic report says you're going to take out sidewalks and do things and find a way to smooth the cars coming in from 95, we don't think this is the way to go. And then the industrial use, which, yes, is very broad, can be turned towards something that the developer can find that's more acceptable to the neighborhood. So I think speculating about what can happen is important here, because we're being asked to think about making a choice that's going to have an impact for the future of this neighborhood. And I don't see how anyone can say this is going to be good for the neighborhood. It's perfectly good for the applicant, and for the owner and all. And I don't think anyone's negative at all about the applicant. They sound like they're a terrific company. But is it good for the neighborhood? And does this harmonize with the neighborhood? Just because something's zoned doesn't mean we have to, to a certain thing. Doesn't mean we necessarily have to approve it if we don't think it fits the neighborhood.
Any final comments? I think Commissioner Barrett has the
I would like, since I moved it, I would like to, if we were going to vote on this, I want to make sure I modify my motion to add appropriate conditions. I'd like to incorporate all the traffic engineers' recommendations, make sure we got them all, about the warning signs, the white shoulders, pavement marking, 15-mile-an-hour speed
If
limit.
you want, Mr. Chairman, I can
Could you repeat them for us?
Thank you,
Thank you.
First one that was recommended is appropriate intersection warning signs be provided and maintained, and there be consideration for reducing speed in both directions of North Pine Creek Road at the underpass with warning signs of 15 miles per hour. Now, that would be a recommendation also, not only a conditional approval, but a letter would be sent to the police commission to uphold and support that recommendation. The next one was that it was recommended that along the site frontage, a solid white shoulder line be installed along the entire front of the site to separate the perpendicular parking spaces and paved areas on the travel lanes, from the travel lanes on Linwood Avenue. And then on the site, it is recommended that appropriate traffic control signing and pavement markings be installed to direct motorists to appropriate lanes for service, center driveway, and parking. Parking for the indoor soccer facility should be clearly marked and separated from the Honda Westport service area. I would recommend also that if we did not receive a representation of that with elevations in our plans that were submitted to us, I think there was some but not all, that we're going to impose that condition that we also require that they submit a revised plan showing elevations and locations of those markings. And the last thing was, I would word it that we require the traffic engineer, because essentially it was one of his recommendations, the applicant to submit to this commission a proposed redesign of the intersection out from Linwood out to represent what he indicated at the hearing as far as widening and better marking that intersection for access and entrance. Those were the ones I think that I remember.
Mr. Chairman,
Yes, Commissioner Wagner.
perhaps we could ask the applicant to also submit a proposal for a delivery plan, like what hours the applicant would restrict deliveries to.
Yeah, okay. The only thing I would mention to that, Commissioner, is that they do have hours of operations listed in their application. As far as deliveries go, you're asking them to submit that now after, as a condition of approval. What if you receive hours that you don't like?
No, as a proposal. In other words, that would be subject to our approval as a condition of approval.
I'm not
No,
sure we
can't
can
do that.
I was actually going to approach this a little different. I didn't actually finish my motion, but maybe this would be okay with you, Mr. Wagner. I wanted to move and thank you for adding those conditions. I would add all of them, plus requiring the require plan showing the elevation and locations, and requiring a redesign of some semblance of what they meant by the redesign of the intersection. That was my bigger concern as far as widening and marking. With the deliveries, I'm trying to figure out how to do this, Mr. Wagner. One idea that I was thinking of adding a condition is to restrict hours of delivery and us state what they are.
Yeah.
And if they don't like it, they could always come back and say, hey, it doesn't work for us, we need an extra hour or something.
Okay.
That's how I was thinking of approaching it, so we could actually get something where we say something, we're not approving something, we're not sure. Would that
Right,
be?
and I think that works. Just with respect to the hours of operation, the applicant testified that it's this lockbox that, deliveries can be made at any time.
Yeah.
And it doesn't need to be manned, and if they, they just drop it in this lockbox
Right.
and they go. So I think it's important that we make sure that we capture that.
I'm sorry, if we could just make a real quick recommendation as far as that goes. I don't know that it would not be inappropriate for you just to restrict, at this point, the deliveries to what they identified as their hours of operation. If they have a problem with that, they can come back.
Sure.
That's a good. And I was gonna come up with a different. So that's even better. Yeah.
We should put in the record what their hours of operations were.
Again, yep,
It's 7:30 a.m. to 6 p.m. Monday through Friday, and Saturday from 7:30 a.m. to 4:30 p.m. according to the applications. That sounds good, Mr.
Yep,
Wagner.
that's fine.
Okay. This-
I would support that.
Thank you. Okay, so I would also add to the motion restriction on hours of operation as stated in the application, including deliveries.
Is there Mr. Commissioner Suter, you seconded the motion. Would you accept that amendment to
Yes,
the
I would.
motion as a condition?
Yes.
Thank you. Is there any further discussion of this item as amended? Hearing none, all in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed signify by saying nay.
Nay.
Nay. So the nays are Commissioner Parker, Alessi, Kennelly, Leclerc. The ayes are Commissioners Barrett, Suter, and Wagner. The item fails. Next item on the agenda, compliance compliance, 401 Kings Highway, application of Renata de Oliveria to establish a pet supplies and grooming shop in a design commercial district.
Okay, I sent you some notes on this. This property is on the corner of Kings Highway and Rising Street, opposite the former Miller Volkswagen site, most recently occupied by Auto Source used car sales. And for many years prior to that, it was a lawnmower and power equipment sales and service building. This is a change of use application from automotive use to retail, which is a permitted use. We're simply looking to make some very modest interior alterations to this space to do a pet grooming, pet supplies shop. They are not selling any pets. It's pet grooming and pet supplies. I think I noted in my notes there's a garage shown on the site plan that did not survive the snow week and it has collapsed and has been subsequently removed from the site. There is some patching the pavement that's required, but the owner intends to do that. Other than that, there's not a lot of change to the site proposed.
If I could just one housekeeping matter. Is this Kings Highway or Kings Highway East there? It's east, correct? Why I question is the map labels it as Kings Highway East, but our approval is Kings Highway. I just wanted to correct it for the record.
The tax assessor's listing is Kings Highway.
It is, okay. Their map may be an error that they've submitted then.
Motion to
I think it's actually Kings Highway East. I call it Kings Highway East. That's his right near Stop and Shop and Miller Volkswagen former site.
Perhaps it is. I mean, the assessor's records have been kind of condensed generally. To my understanding, everything east of Black Rock Turnpike is generally Kings Highway East. There's Kings Highway cutoff that runs between the traffic circle and Black Rock Turnpike, and then there's another chunk of Kings Highway that runs below Bed Bath and Beyond, past West East, and now a signalized intersection with Grassmere Avenue. So,
But there are no duplicate numbers on whether it be Kings Highway or Kings Highway East, so it's clear what we're talking about here, I think. Whether it's
we're without a doubt talking about a piece of property that's on the corner of Horizon Street, whether it be Kings Highway or Kings Highway.
That's what I want to establish for the record, so we don't have any, we don't create any issues where there should be none in the future.
Motion
Commissioner Kennelly?
Motion to approve, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. Is there a second? Commissioner Alessi, any discussion?
Just want to show I'm not an enemy of commerce. And I just got a dog, so.
Hearing no discussion, all in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, abstentions, carries unanimously. Next, we're going to be going to public hearing in a minute. To the public who's here, we have two items on the agenda for public hearing. 5151 Park Avenue, that's a Sacred Heart University application, followed by 2291 Post Road, which is a continuation of a public hearing we began several weeks ago. That's William Christensen's application for a new office building. So what we'll do, we'll stand in a brief recess to reconfigure the room and the microphones. Meeting's back in session. We have two items on the agenda for public hearing. The first item we will begin with tonight is 5151 Park Avenue. It's a special exception application of Sacred Heart University pertaining to the construction of a softball stadium in an R3 zone. Attorney Fitzpatrick.
Mr. Chairman, members of the Commission, for the record, my name's Bill Fitzpatrick. I'm an attorney in Fairfield with the law firm of Fitzpatrick, Frey, and Bologna. Our offices are at 1150 Post Road. I'm here this evening representing Sacred Heart University, which, as you know, is located at the intersection of Park Avenue and Jefferson Street. The university campus contains 56.5 acres, is located in the Residence R3 zoning district. The zoning regulations for the R3 district include a university as a permitted use via special exception approval. The application before you tonight requests special exception approval pursuant to Section 27 of the zoning regulations for the construction of a new replacement softball facility. The softball field is located in the westerly portion of the university campus between the Jefferson Street dormitories on the north and the football field on the south. The university's intent is to improve the existing softball field by the construction of a softball facility, which includes a new press box, new bleachers, and 2 new dugouts. The existing softball field will be in essentially the same location, or the proposed softball field will be located in essentially the same location, and the existing press box, existing bleachers, and existing dugouts will be removed. To further describe this proposal, I'd like to introduce Mr. Patrick Rose, a principal in the firm of Rose, Tizo and Company, LLC of Fairfield, and a registered architect. Patrick.
Good evening. My name is Patrick Rose, principal in the firm Rose, Tizo and Company in Fairfield, 35 Brentwood Avenue. The project before us tonight is a replacement of the softball facility at Sacred Heart University. The existing softball field in this location map you can see here, Park Avenue's here, Jefferson Street along here. The softball facility is back by the Jefferson Street dormitories and the tennis courts, which are adjacent to the football field. So softball field has been in this location for a very long time. We are going to be replacing it with a new facility. Currently at the softball field there is a press box, dugouts, and a storage building. The current field is about 190 feet to the fence of the tennis court. In order to meet NCAA requirements, it's 200 feet to 225 feet. So we're going to be relocating the field slightly to the north and slightly to the west. This is the old location of the diamond, and now we're going to be in this location, moving it away from the campus driveway and a little bit closer to the residential dormitory. Installing screening along this edge to keep the foul balls within the field of play. The facility that we're designing and would like to have approved is about 326 seats. Currently there's between 175 to 200 bleachers there. These are the actual seats. A press box behind those seats, a dugout on either end. Behind the dugout would be a locker room facility for home and visiting teams. The facility itself, in its configuration, has the seats being about 4 feet, starting about 4 feet above the playing surface, so that you, for our sight lines, be able to see down to the field of play. Moving the field allows us to get a full 200 feet to this walkway, which goes between the tennis courts and the softball field.
Where's the orientation again of the press box? Can you just show us where it is right now?
Press box right here.
The current press box, I'm sorry.
Current press box, it's hard to see on this, in this location right behind
I mean, are you
field.
rotating the field more so that if you're at home plate, you're
Not-
looking at the pit center, or?
No, we're not rotating the field at all, actually. We're just moving it slightly to the south and slightly, actually to the north and slightly to the west. We're moving the field about 20 feet in each direction.
Hey, why I ask is the sound system, I know lighting is not part of this proposal. Is the sound
Correct.
system part of this? 'Cause you
There
have resident-
will be a sound system associated with the press box directed out towards the tennis court and the football field.
So you'll not be aiming towards the senior citizen facility next?
No, and it's
Jewish home.
meant to service the 326 people in that facility. It's not meant to broadcast to everyone. Give you an idea of the building itself. Lower level of this building, there are 2 vomitories which lead to the seats in the upper level. Below that, there's some storage or all the sundry things that go along with the softball field and practicing. And then there are these stairs which lead up, and there's a ramp in this location for handicap access onto the stadium seating. So essentially we have 4 ways off, 1, 2, 3, 4. Seats step up at about a foot each tier, and then there's some steps that lead up into this press box, a video room, and a stair that leads down from that to grade. That's the second means of egress. Dugouts are straddling the field, and there's a locker room facility accessed from the rear and from the dugout to the back of each dugout. That allows us to, currently there are no toilet facilities at all. Yes?
How tall is the top of the press box from the ground?
Top of the press box is approximately 25 feet now, because you're starting at elevation 4,
Right.
going up at a tier at a time. It's about 20 feet or so to the top of the windows and another 4 or 5 feet for our roof. I'll just show you an elevation of that. This is an elevation of looking from the campus road and from the dormitory entrance into the vomitories here and here, going up onto the seating, which is here, and the press box in this location. Locker room in this location and this location. This is an elevation from inside the field. Looking at, we're using brick on the inside of our field. The whole building will be brick on the outside and on the inside wall that surrounds the stadium. Dugouts, chain link fence dugouts on either side. This probably is the best thing for you to understand a little bit better as to what's going on. This is the field proper. We step up to seating. Seating steps up to the press box video room.
Are the current bleachers, are they all weather? They're year-round bleachers, they don't come in, or they're there now?
They're there right
I didn't
now.
look
They're
this
there
up.
all the time, yes.
Yeah, okay.
Correct. But they're bleachers, not seating.
They're benches
Yeah,
as
they're
opposed
just
to chairs.
benches. These are chairs,
Right.
yes, correct.
And you said they currently hold about 175? Is
About
that
150, 175 people.
somewhere in there? Right, you can't,
Yeah.
with a bench, depends on how
Are you
big they
familiar
are.
with the Yale softball facility, Yale University?
Not Yale. Are you familiar with the DeLuca Field?
No.
In Stratford. It's a similar
Oh,
facility.
yeah, in Stratford, yes.
DeLuca Field in Stratford is a similar facility where you're up. The first tier is like 3 or 4 feet up.
And that's why this seems to remind me of the one at Yale. That's why I was asking.
It's
if essentially the same
similar,
design.
very, very similar to most NCAA facilities where you're viewing and you're close to the action. Now you have to raise you up in order so you can have a view down onto the field. Brought with me brick sample and precast. All the outside of the building will be brick, full face brick, and with a precast cap on top, similar to how the current seating for the football field is constructed. That is the brick walls on the outside.
Thank you, Mr. Rose.
Mr. Chairman, I'd now like to sum up and conclude this presentation, making specific reference to Section 27 of the zoning regulations, the special exception section. The relevant factors for consideration by the Commission in reviewing a special exception application are outlined in Section 27.4 of the regulations. The first section, Section 27.4.1, notes that the proposed use shall be in harmony with the appropriate and orderly development of the town and neighborhood and not discourage appropriate development and use of adjacent property. In this matter, the issue of harmony with the neighborhood and the town has essentially already been settled. This use, the use of the property by Sacred Heart University is decades old and has been recognized by this commission as well as the Town Plan of Conservation and Development with respect to this specific use. The use of this area as a softball field is also, by my experience, decades old and has not been, to the best of my knowledge, the subject of any complaints with the Town Plan and Zoning Commission or staff or anyone else. The location of this field is approximately 700 feet from the closest residential neighbor to the north on Jefferson Street and approximately 1,200 feet from the closest residential neighbor to the west on Autumn Ridge. The second part of 27.4.1, that the proposed use not hinder or discourage appropriate development or the use of adjacent property, again is satisfied here by the fact that the university has existed since 1963. It's self-evident that the addition of a new softball facility replacing a sorely outdated structure is devoid of any impact on the appropriate development and use of adjacent property. Section 27.4.2 is satisfied here relative to access for fire protection because there's certainly open access to this part of the campus. 27.4.3 relates to traffic. Clearly, the softball stadium generates, would you pass that out, please, Pat? No significant traffic in and of itself. The intent is that the facility serve existing Sacred Heart University students. As such, this proposal will have no impact on internal vehicular activities, nor any impact on adjacent roadways. I am submitting for the record a letter from Michael Galante of Frederick P. Clark Associates confirming the lack of any traffic impact. Section 27.4.5 speaks to the conformity of the proposed use with the master plan of the town. This section is satisfied since the presence of the university is acknowledged in the Town Plan of Conservation and Development, which was adopted by your commission in the year 2000, and the proposed softball field will have no discernible effect on any residential neighbor. Indeed, it's unlikely that any residential neighbor will even be able to see the softball field. Women's softball at Sacred Heart is a flagship sport. Sacred Heart's team last year was the champion of its league, the NEC. They qualified for the NCAA, where they lost to LSU, the number 20 team in the country. The team has a 36-game schedule and recruits across the country. Two of its best players are from California. The improvements to the softball field proposed here make sense, given the stature and the level of accomplishment of this program, particularly since it has no negative impact on any surrounding property owners. And also, I think the Commission should know that the university permits other teams to use the facility on occasion, such as the high school playoffs. I believe the application fully complies with the relevant zoning regulations. For those reasons, I'd request this special exception application be approved. The university would like to commence construction this fall, so that the sooner the application is decided, the better from the university's perspective. Michael Kinney and Mark Izzo from Sacred Heart University are here with me, and together with Pat Rose and me, we'd be happy to answer any questions the Commission may have.
Commissioner Kennelly?
Thank you. Mr. Fitzpatrick, just a couple things. The seats are going to go from 175 or 150 to 175 to in the 350 range.
326.
326 range, excuse me, I'm sorry. Is there a corresponding additional parking in the area or anything like that? Not at all?
No.
So
Actually, the fact of the matter
Right.
is, Mr. Kennelly, if you went to a game that
Right.
was popular, the kids sit up on the grass on the hills around it. Now they'll have a seat.
I see,
We're
right.
really not changing the population.
you said it's a 36-game schedule. Is that just in total, or like do they play 18 home games, 18 away, or approximately? I mean, is it all is it 36 games on the field? I'm just gonna
Actually, their record was 29 and 21, so
Right.
they ended up playing 50
Right.
because
Playoffs.
of
Right.
playoffs and the NCAA, et cetera. But I didn't realize it until I looked up their schedule. There are 2 or 3 games, I think most often 2, played each time they meet.
Right.
So there are actually less dates,
I see.
but more games per day.
I see.
And it is pretty much split from what I saw on a home and away, with the exception, they would like to get south and get better weather early in April, so probably more away than home. And then the playoffs are where the games really mount up.
So this really isn't a response to even though the Pioneers are doing terrific, this isn't due to some explosion in people have to see the games who are off campus. These are folks on campus who before sitting on the hill.
Yeah.
And you want to upgrade too, so that any other folks who want to use the field are going to have a nicer field.
If it's,
Okay.
it's just like
Okay.
UConn wanting to get a basketball facility for its recruits. They'd like to have a nice softball facility for their recruits
But
coming
because you have
in.
320 seats doesn't mean you're getting another 100. You're not putting another bunch of parking spaces to match the seats.
Absolutely not.
Gotcha.
Mr. Fitzpatrick, 2 things before you conclude and we go to public comment. First, on behalf of the Commission, I want to thank you for the reduced-sized plans. Those are greatly appreciated by all the commissioners for looking at these. The second is you made a comment about starting construction in the fall, and while we usually don't vote on applications the same night we hear them. My question is this, I know that this is not a commercial building that may just open a few weeks later. With Fields, we've been told in the past that there's significant construction issues, timing issues for planting the grass in particular, and getting a season. Are you asking us to vote on this tonight, or if we were to vote on this in 2 weeks, will you not lose a year on the field, or need to find an alternative home for your team because it's not prepared in time?
Mike, you need
You gotta
to
come to the
speak
microphone, sir.
through the mic, please. Michael, you need to be here.
I am Senior Vice President for Finance and Construction at Sacred Heart University.
Just give us your name
Also-
again, so the microphone.
Also a
picks up.
resident of Fairfield.
You have to give us your name again, the microphone didn't
Kinney,
get it.
Kinney.
Thank you.
It would greatly help us, for sure, if we could start construction this fall. Otherwise, if we go too late into the fall, we do lose the season. It's pretty simple. It's really as simple as that. And it has to do just with pre-construction materials and sod, grass, all that type of stuff. That if we could get it approved, we would. If we have to wait, that's we're such is life.
Thank you, sir.
I have nothing further, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Mr. Fitzpatrick. Is there any member of the public that would like to comment on this item? Hearing none, Mr. Fitzpatrick, any final comments?
Nothing further. Thank you very much for your time and attention.
Thank you. This will close the public hearing on 5151 Park Avenue, application of Sacred Heart University in connection with women's softball field upgrade. Thank you. Our next public hearing is a continuation of a hearing that began 2 weeks ago, 2291 Post Road, special exception application and coastal site plan application of William Christian pertaining to the construction of a new office building in a designed commercial district. Mr. Jankowski, welcome again. Before we begin, I would just like to put on the record that we did receive additional documents that were submitted to all the commission members and were made a part of our file on or about August 30th. It was all in our last hearing. There were revised drawings. We have both large versions of them that came in the packet. We were emailed back to the August smaller versions. Mr. Jankowski, perhaps you can comment on what we received, and then maybe I'll give you a bit of latitude. I know it's a little bit disjointed the way the last hearing went. And so feel free to summarize where you were.
I think basically where we were, when we got bogged down was a small rendering submitted, which was somewhat different than the plans and larger rendering. And because of that, I think we'd like to start off with the architect, Mr. McGoldrick, again, to go over that, the plans.
Thank you.
Yeah, I'm George McGoldrick, an architect from Marion. Let me start again. Last time we presented this sample of the palette. What I would like to do is begin by walking through the plan. I think that was also the problem we encountered last time. The ground, we go on larger copies of this as well. But, the ground floor plan is here, and what may have confused people is that a large portion of what is on the ground floor is parking. The only enclosed elements on the ground floor are the entry area, which will be facing the street, with a lobby, an elevator, stair tower, and a mechanical space. The other enclosed area is the stair tower at the rear of the building, which provides a second exit for for address code purposes. There is a low wall along one portion of the building here. The intention there is to ensure the traffic follows the wind pattern around the building. Each of the two upper floors will be identical. Again, we've included the replication of the stair tower, elevator, mechanical room, and a lobby space on each of those floors, and then the stair tower exactly again. The plan we're showing here, the build-out here, may not be as it actually occurs, or it's only discussions with the tenants about how that actually build-out will occur. Their requirements regarding that, but obviously nothing will be end-goal will change.
Are there current tenants proposed?
The owner's in negotiation with some potential tenants, and so, we get to have final discussions about their requirements.
So, but it's anticipated that there would be two tenants?
Both parties looking at it, I believe
There are, and that's their medical type tenants?
Yes.
So regardless then of your interior, what you're stating is you may move the walls on the inside, but the exterior view, the windows, everything front will remain the same on the show.
Yeah.
So these are things we wouldn't be able to notice from the outside.
Right, exactly. And I know there was concern about the roof on the too, and I wanted to be clear about that. We're proposing a 3-foot parapet around the entire building except for this center section, which will show the elevation when we get there. Again, we indicated like the close location of the rooftop units, which was a concern, and a diagram indicating sort of what I'm sure is the worst possible case with respect to the rooftop units, which would be a large one, a 5-foot unit on about 14-inch curve. And with the 3-foot parapet, what the diagram indicates is that you have to be 169 feet away from the building to see the rooftop unit with your proposed locations. Now, with respect to the elevations, the front of the building facing Post Road, the main entrance with a glass enclosed entry element, a stair tower, and lobbies that we saw on the plan. The passage to the underground parking here, and then the two floors, completed floors above. The rear is simply kind of the mirror of that, rear of the building. The west elevation again shows you will see this corner, and then again the glass in the tower, an office element, another environment block office element. The intention here is it's always a little challenging to create a building around the parking requirements in a situation like this. We simply didn't want to end up with a building on stilts. So what we've done here is to try and balance. We've got essentially two blocks connected by this horizontal glass element. This is the intention. These are the open areas to the parking. Again, the reverse side of that, the east side of the building. We've replicated what you've seen on the west side. The difference being that on this side we can have the same opportunity to enclose portions of the building here. So we do have the columns, and that again was to accommodate the parking requirements. What you're seeing in here would be the other side of the back side of the west side of the building. And I think that was a point of confusion last time. Other than that, I'm prepared to take any questions there may be.
Mr. Goldberg, I had a question. I'm not sure if it's you or you'd rather defer to Mr. Hammonds on the parking and specifically loading zone parking. Is that you or Mr. Hammonds? I should
I think
address
that
that
would be
too.
Mr. Hammonds, yeah.
That's fine. And I guess just one question for you, just so I'm clear. The elevation of the building and the parking, am I correct that it's 10 foot 10, I believe?
Yeah, what we're showing, again, we've included some decorative elements, screening at the windows, and then, as the parking area, just to continue the pattern. That is 10-8. Well,
10-8.
Which we've looked at, I think that will accommodate any, basically the largest delivery vehicles and certainly most of the emergency vehicles that would come, which run 9.6 to 10 feet high.
Are there any other questions of Mr. McGoldrick from the commission?
I just one quick thing, since Richard isn't here. Any elements of the building, any elements of the building that are green featured or things like that are positive environmentally, they might want to mention?
Yeah, obviously that's something we, as we get into the
Well,
mechanical system, that's clearly something
Sure.
we want to do. It's in everyone's interest to maximize the energy advantages we can have. Certainly the screening is intended to do that. The mechanical units we select, the same.
Okay.
So, yeah.
Thank you.
Mr. Chairman, ladies and gentlemen, the plans are engineer and land surveyor. Our offices are here in Fairfield. We prepared the plans. We reached about this point about 2 weeks ago when our time ran out. We were talking about the various site plans. I'd just like to review a few of the salient features. One thing that always is not part of the application tonight, not part of the special permit application, but involves the neighbors is a clear and correct understanding of how the parcel has come to be over a period of time. This is the parcel that we're talking about here. At one time, these two parcels were together. There is an existing duplex residence right here. There's a single family here. This is the zone line here. You have an A zone here, a B zone here, and design commercial district, I think, back up here. It's commercial district. The intent was to, previous to this application, the driveway, and it is currently in use, is to the post road for this duplex. There's a driveway, a dirt driveway, that this duplex uses for ingress. This driveway has been moved to provide sole use for a single family. This driveway will be built with a curb cut onto Sasko Hill Road to provide only access for the duplex. This extra driveway will in no way be used by the commercial building. I'll explain that. The reason I'm saying that is that the lot lines are moved in order to incorporate that. Very careful discussions with Mr. Wint and Maureen from my office worked out that the areas that were not, in other words, this portion of the property, follow my finger, that's the B zone. Well, that's the only part of the lot area that we used to calculate FAR, coverage, etc. We didn't take everything. We only took the residential part of that zone. Similarly with the Sasko Hill piece. So when we talk about, you'll see areas sitting there saying existing area, proposed area. The two areas are different. Well, that's the reason why they're different. When we say existing area, we're talking about the net area of only the residential part of that lot. And then we go ahead and calculate the zoning calculations, mostly coverage, on that basis. A couple weeks ago, we talked about the site plan. We reviewed the fact that the CAM had been reviewed by Mr. Bunovsky. We went through the zoning calculations. At that time, I also indicated the drainage calculations incorporating these underground stormwater recharger chambers. As some of you are no doubt aware, the National Resource Conservation Service, the NRCS, which is a federal agency, they're kind of together with NOAA. What's been happening over the last 10 years is with more data points, with more science, the ferocity, if you will, or the intensity of the storms are being upgraded. In other words, before, the Connecticut Department of Transportation back in the 90s released a 100-year storm for a 24-hour period was 7.2 inches. And that was our design. That's what we used, 7.2 inches per 100 year. So you will see when you read the drainage report, 7.2 inches or whatever it was. Well, and since then, the NRCS has been, especially the New England portion of it, has been pressuring this municipalities in New England and the states, especially the DOTs of the various states, to adopt a higher 100-year, 50-year, 25-year, 10-year, 2-year storm based upon, again, more data. To give you an idea, the 100-year storm I just told you was 7.2 inches. That's what the Connecticut Department of Transportation uses for a 24-hour storm. We use here 8.46 inches, 1.2 inches more for a 100-year storm. You'll see more and more of that as the local engineers start to adopt the NRCS. Drainage manuals being released now by municipalities, Darien, Greenwich in particular, West Hartford, Avon are the ones that I'm most familiar with, are adopting the NRCS intensity rising rainfall. So you'll see it. We like to hide behind it. We conservative engineers, we like to say we're conservative. And we say, well, we've adopted the new NRCS parameters. That's my point. This has been designed for those higher rainfall amounts. And again, the issue is storm runoff, the rate of runoff, the recharge to the ground, and the quality of the water that runs off ultimately. And all those three items have been addressed by our design. Mr. Sachs last time talked at length about the planting plan. I won't go over that. And then we didn't really talk about it. We spent more time trying to figure out if this was really sheet 404, which it was. The soil erosion sediment control plan is based upon the Connecticut manual, the 1972 manual. I would like to talk briefly about the traffic flow. The intent, as you can see, these parking spaces are diagonal, slanted to the south, to the northeast. And traffic will come in this way, one way. You easily make this bend, the radius is very large, and then come back out and then out to wherever they want to go. Inside the garage, under the building, is two-way traffic. So basically from here, if you follow my fingers to there, is two-way. This is one way as a circular route. This flow was looked at by Manny Silva of Rose Tizo. He was the traffic engineer that spoke a couple weeks ago. He's not here tonight, but I've read his manual. I am not a specialist in traffic engineering, but I can answer questions if you have them concerning the traffic report. And this provides adequate access by emergency vehicles. I think Mr. Leclerc or Mr. Barat asked about the loading space. We want to use one of these as a loading space over here. The height of a UPS truck in Southwest Connecticut, this is my homework, and I believe Mr. Leclerc kind of gave it to me as a homework assignment. I actually went when a truck was parked and the guy was eating lunch, and I measured it. That's the advantage of being a surveyor. You can do those things. Because I was kind of abashed as to how to explain why I had to do it. So he said, look, why don't you call this guy at our office? He'll explain the whole thing. So I called him. He says, yeah, in Southwest Connecticut, we don't stock any trucks above 10'6" because of the railroad underpasses. So you're talking about North Pine Creek, that's 10'7". That's about the lowest they get. There's a 10'5", there's a couple of them in Bridgeport. There's a 10'5". There's one in Westport, I know, but I want to say Compo, but it's not Compo. Anyways, a couple of them that are even lower. As the architect indicated, by lifting that little grill, whatever he wants to call that thing, we'll have 11'2" from the ground to the entranceway. So obviously a FedEx truck, fire trucks are even lower, EMS trucks are lower. All those things can pass through without a problem.
Mr. Hammond, the question I had is, I believe our regs under 28.5 on loading require there to be, correct me, 12 by 30 for loading space. Does that not apply to this?
Not for retail. It's not required for office.
Because there's no retail component to this at all.
Correct.
And again, if we can go back again, you said 11.2 if you take off that decorative piece. I think the architect indicated it was 10.8 rather? I'm just a little confused as to what actually it is you're proposing here, so we...
It was 10.8.
It's 10.8 now, but we actually go to 12.8 if we take that off. So.
Oh, sorry, I stand corrected. 10.8 now goes to 12.8 if it's removed. So it's 2 feet?
Yeah.
Okay.
And what is your testimony regarding the height of UPS trucks that are used?
10'6".
10.6.
Yeah. And then, so I called the UPS fellow that the guy gave me the card for, and he actually reviews truck routes and that kind of stuff to optimize drop-offs. And they actually have Jeeps that they use for UPS for those very, very few isolated areas. He told me there's one in Greenwich, and there's one in Darien, and there's one, of course, in Darien. You know, where only one small truck can get to it. And so that UPS truck is for those things. And it was an interesting conversation.
You didn't measure FedEx trucks by any chance, did you?
Lower.
A little lower?
It's lower. I talked to FedEx. They said, UPS, we're lower. He said, what he actually said,
Not the rates, the heights.
What he actually says, we save money, we just go lower than UPS. We don't design. So he says, look, we just do it, we know UPS works, so we just make them lower.
So the FedEx delivery trucks are shorter than the UPS. We don't have to worry about someone taking out the...
Yeah, if you remember we talked about that, where we had that SUV, the single unit vehicle truck, and we were trying to scale it with that little ridiculous
Right,
thing from the Green Book. It was like 13 feet. And I remember Mike Galante saying, yeah, they're not 13 feet. And I'm like, I don't think so. So it was a little short, but it was kind of fun. It was a nice guy, too, so I learned something. All the utilities are underground. I think we mentioned that. And beyond that, that's the site plan, that's our application.
Thank you, Mr. Hammond. Are there any other questions? Commissioner Barrett?
Yes. Mr. Hammond, you spoke of the traffic flow. Could you describe what markings are proposed to control that traffic flow? I mean, I assume some patients might be new, first time to this facility. How are they going to know not to go back out the indoor, if they're parked under the building, not to go back the other way?
I was actually going to trust the landscape architect to develop that plan. There will be, one way, do not enter. There'll be the halt bars.
Arrows on the pavement?
Yeah, the arrows on the pavement, that type of thing. But Mr. Sachs would be more appropriate to speak to that.
Okay.
Thank you. Any further questions, Mr. Hammond? Thank you.
Thank you.
I believe that concludes our presentation. I'm sure someone will get public comment.
There's a question.
I just have one question.
Commissioner
I
Parker.
believe that Commissioner Barrett's raised the question last time about any kind of contact with the neighbor in terms of any shared, has anything taken place?
Not since the last meeting, and I think I'll address that in my closing comments. I'm sorry, the landscape architect would just like to add something about the lighting.
Good evening. For the record, my name is Stuart Sachs, landscape architect. I'd like to make 3 comments about the lighting. I believe that there are 6 fixtures that are pole mounted on the site. They're numbered. Each one of those lights is about twice as tall as I am, 12 feet. That's the emitting level. And if you look outside in the parking lot, you can see the lights that are out there. I think they're probably 18 or 20. These are considerably smaller, much more of a residential almost scale. The second point about these lights is that they are listed as a pulse start metal halide. That's a fairly white light, very much like the color of the light that you see on these uplights in here. And it has a very long-lived, sustainable use. Part of that definition of the fixture that has been chosen is that they are dark sky compliant. That means all the light that's coming out of that fixture is less than 180 degrees from its output. So it's like this. Light output coming is below the horizon line. And it also has, as a third point here, all of these pole lights have deep baffle cutoffs. If the light angle is down like this, the deep baffle is going to make it go down even farther. These are elements that are trimmed specifically in the field so that there is no accidental light going off in a corner. It's a nighttime piece of work.
Mr. Sack, hold just for a second. I need to change the tape.
Thank
Thank
you.
you. Okay, thank you.
The other lights that are considered for the site are recessed lights at the entry, not unlike what you have here in the ceiling directly down. There is one light in the back wall, which there is a detail in the drawings that shows it as an area light, wall-mounted. It has very similar characteristics to the elements of having a deep baffle on the side. Also a dark sky compliant fixture, downward casting light. I think that concludes my comments unless there are any questions.
Are there any questions from Mr. Sachs? Commissioner Barrett?
Yeah, Mr. Sachs, Mr. Hammond says you might be able to talk more to any signage or markings for the traffic flow.
I'd be glad to. And I think that is something that needs to be worked out with the architect because there is a line of sight that you want to design for from people coming in. And that's sometimes different than the people who are walking around. So there's two different groups of signage that should be addressed. I think some of those are, they may be indicated in part by the building department, fire marshal, stop signs, that sort of thing, no parking, fire lanes, markings, all of that I'm sure would be done. The others might be as a suggestion from their insurance company that more or better signage be indicated. I think the idea of having that as a simple wayfaring direction would be helpful.
Okay.
I don't have a plan drawn for it, but I think it's something that will have to be done.
Thank you. Any further comments or questions from Mr. Sachs? Thank you, Mr. Sachs.
Thank you.
This time we'll go to public comment. How this works again, for those of you that are new, members of the public get to comment one at a time regarding this application. If there's any questions, they should be addressed to us as a commission. And we will then have the opportunity as a commission to ask those questions of the applicant through his counsel when they're done. Again, just come up one at a time and identify your name and address for the record at the microphone. Attorney Green?
Good evening, Mr. Chairman, members of the commission, staff. My name is Joel Green. I practice law in Bridgeport with the law offices of Green and Gross. And I appear before you this evening on behalf of the Sasko Hill Neighborhood Association. And we appear in opposition to this application. And the opposition of my client arises based on a number of factors. I suppose first and foremost, the opposition arises out of what I would call a larger planning view of this project and its impact on sort of a broader view of this corridor and this area of Route 1 and certainly this gateway area into our town. Other concerns relate to the lack of compliance of this application with the Fairfield zoning regulations. There's incomplete and inaccurate data in the application that's before you. Certainly, there are safety concerns by virtue of this particular plan on this site, and also the related development of the rear lot and access on Sasko Hill Road. And we'll talk about that a little further, but based on the larger scheme in which this development is involved, there would, as I believe Mr. Hammonds said, there would be access from the, what I would call the rear lot, onto Sasko Hill Road. As you're aware from an application that was filed by One Sasko LLC a few months back, that was before this commission, there are issues, and there is the potential for 3 driveways to exit on Sasko Hill Road, 3 driveways which are right next to each other and are proximate to the intersection of Sasko Hill with Route 1. Certainly that's of significant concern to my clients from a traffic standpoint and from a safety standpoint. But I should emphasize that we recognize the need to develop this property just as we recognize the need to develop the One Sasko property. We encourage the reasonable development of the property and look forward to the reasonable development of the property. But for all the reasons which I've identified, we can't support this particular development. I would like to introduce Hank Heck from the Sasko Hill Neighborhood Association, who will present a brief statement on behalf of the association before I proceed with my presentation.
Thank you and good evening. And my name is Hank Heck, and I live at 794 Sasko Hill Road. And I just wanted to take a moment to provide some comments and context as to the Sasko Hill Neighborhood Association, which is newly formed, but we've been appearing here before some of your hearings over the last few months, both with the One Sasko LLC application and with this particular application. And my comments are just to provide some information around the mission of the newly formed association, which is really that as we look at the development that's going to be occurring along Post Road at the end of the Sasko Hill Neighborhood Association, we see that there's an opportunity to work positively with the nearby real estate developers and all of the neighbors. We see the role of the association as being a business builder and an enhancer of the neighborhood, and hopefully by extension to all of Fairfield as well. A key objective of the association is to achieve commercially successful new buildings, but which also contribute from a design perspective to the New England architectural vernacular, which has made Fairfield so special and so attractive for so long. An added objective is to work with all stakeholders to monitor that new developments do not otherwise negatively impact the neighborhood with unreasonable traffic increases or other deterrents which interfere with the peaceful enjoyment of the neighborhood. It's hoped that the association's efforts going forward at cooperation with the developers will reduce, if not eliminate, the need for opposition efforts at TPZ hearings. Also in time, the association hopes to be a proactive force in other ways, such as by enlisting the services of urban design professionals with experience in small-town New England planning, with the hope of creating a guide for the association to create a set of aspirational plans for possible consideration as a development enhancement for the Post Road western entrance to Fairfield. The association welcomes the guidance and input of the TPZ board and staff, and we look forward to working positively together as we move forward. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Heck.
Thank you. And just to amplify some comments that Mr. Heck made, the Sasko Hill Neighborhood Association looks forward to really opening a dialogue with this commission about developing perhaps some design standards, some sort of a larger planning function in that corridor. And I again, and as I indicated on the application by One Sasko a few months ago, I recognize the hard and good work this commission did on the train station, and I recognize that getting involved with another planning function for this area after you've spent so much time and effort on the train station is sort of like awarding the winner of the pie eating contest more pie. I get that, but
That's what we get paid.
But certainly, it's a necessary. It's important to this association. I think it's important to all of us in Fairfield, and I think we all recognize the growth that our town has seen. We all recognize the impact, and I also have talked to you many times about the incremental impact of projects such as these. And you know, we look at this application, we look within the boundary lines on this plan, and with all due respect to the traffic report and to the traffic consultant, that sort of thing, each individual project that has been before this commission forever, a traffic consultant has gotten up for the applicant and said there will be no impact on traffic in our town. And anyone who tries to drive on Black Rock Turnpike or Post Road at select times of the day recognizes the incremental impact and the need to have a sort of a larger 30,000-foot view as to how our town is developing. And I certainly, again, want to acknowledge the good work by this commission in that regard. I have some materials that I'd like to share. Comment on, I recognize that this application sort of deals with the development of the site within these boundary lines, but I need to respond to just perhaps bring this to the Commission's attention in terms of the development of the site, because Mr. Hammond's touched on it. It is correct that there was a variance granted to the property owner to change the access to what I will call the rear lot to access from Sasko Hill Road. And while it may or may not be directly applicable to this proposal, it's our position that the applicant proposes to violate the express terms of the variance, in that the variance required, and again, it's sort of interesting as to whether that question is directly before the Commission this evening, because we are talking about 2291 Post Road, but in view of the fact that it was raised by the applicant, I should reference the fact that our concerns relate to, first of all, the fact that the driveway that is proposed to be substituted to access the rear lot, an express condition of the approval of the variance was that use was in common, that the driveway would be a common driveway with 45 Sasko Hill Road. On all of the plans that this applicant has submitted to this commission or to the Zoning Board of Appeals, it is shown as, well, certainly this plan that is before this commission this evening shows two driveways. That's a violation of the express condition of the variance that was granted. Another condition that really is something that you would need to what I'm going to do is, I don't have copies for the whole submission, but on the original application for a variance that goes back to 2007, in the application, this applicant in the application to the Zoning Board of Appeals that was ultimately approved, and I only have a few copies to submit into the record, but an express statement in the application that was approved is The applicant desires to switch that access easement to 45 Saskill Hill Road, and it says which also would be within the design commercial district. The access out to Saskill Hill Road would be 15 feet in length. However, from 30 feet in from Saskill Hill Road, the easement would be 20 feet in width in order to alleviate any potential ingress-egress problems off of Saskill Hill Road. And I note that in the drawings that are shown, the actual access way at Saskill Hill Road is only 15 feet and not 20 feet, which was granted by the commission, or granted by the ZBA. So I would suggest that the access driveway was supposed to be wider at Saskill Hill Road. Again, I will qualify these comments with the fact that this application, and I can hear Attorney Jankowski telling me that this application only deals with 2291, but I do feel that this was raised by Mr. Hammonds and it should be before the commission.
That's fine, and I mean, you can make whatever comments you want. It's up to us whether they're relevant and germane to the application.
Thank you.
But the variance grant that you're talking about, is that in the record? Do we have that?
Well, I think it was referenced in comments. However, I have what I'd like to submit to the commission is the actual application, the notice of variance, the granting of the variance, and actually a small excerpt from the site plan that was submitted, and I'll submit that into the record.
Do you have copies of that?
I have a few copies.
What I would suggest, Joe, once you start it with Commissioner Parker, that it can work its way around, and then when we ultimately get it, we'll end up behind.
Actually, I have some extra copies, so I don't have enough for everyone.
No, I didn't see that. I didn't see the variance. If I understand your argument correctly, it's relevant because they have to adjust the driveway in order to make the plan in the application work. And if their proposal is in deviation from the variance that was granted, and they don't do that properly, then the duplex will continue to have ingress and egress over the property that's subject to the application, and therefore it won't work.
Or it will have to, yes, or it will have to have application in a manner that is it would have access in a manner that is not conforming. In a manner that is not conforming. Also,
why would it not be conforming, though? I mean, I understand your argument with respect to the plan, and that the plan might show the dual driveway and not a common driveway. But what if it was a common driveway?
if it was a common driveway, then that aspect of it would be conforming.
Right.
If it was 20 feet wide at Sasko Hill Road, then that aspect of it would be conforming at that time. If for 30 feet in from Sasko Hill Road it was 20 feet wide, which was an express condition of the approval, it would be conforming.
Okay, so understood. And if the plan showed those conformances with respect to the driveway, because that doesn't impact the way, I mean, explain to me how that impacts the site that's been proposed.
Well, at the present time, the site is being used for access to, for egress and ingress to what I would call the rear lot. And I will get into sort of the history of that momentarily. But right at the moment, the access is over,
the subject lot.
Is over the subject lot.
Right.
The change that is proposed with respect to, if this were to be approved, I imagine, then the access would then revert, or I'm sorry, would change to over this access way, which is non-conforming.
Non-conforming in the plans, but supposing, hypothetical, that plan showed a common driveway that's 30 feet or 20 in conformance with the variance that was granted. That's not before us. I mean, they got a variance. Supposing that drawing showed a driveway which was conforming to the variance that was granted, does that impact the plan that's been proposed for the subject lot? I mean, I don't get it.
If it were compliant, and if every aspect of the access were compliant, was compliant with your zoning regulations and with the variance, then it wouldn't impact. Except, there's another issue which I will get into shortly involving the way the property is divided, but I'll lay a foundation for that as we go forward.
Well, that's the point here, I think, is, we're dealing with the property on the Post Road at 2291 Post Road. And if in fact they have a drawing that shows an improper driveway, I think it's clear from the record that should we approve the application for 2291 Post Road, we are not at all approving what may be drawn on the drawing for the rear lot at all. If in fact they've made a mistake and they've drawn a 15-foot versus a 20-foot, that may be an issue for zoning enforcement if they build it according to what's in that drawing. We're only dealing with the front parcel, and if in fact, that's what I think we're getting at here. There may be, if it's drawn wrong, that, may be fine, but that doesn't mean we've approved what's been drawn regarding another lot, because that lot's not before us. It's only the front lot that we're focusing on.
And frankly, I hadn't intended to get into that issue, but then the applicant raised the sort of the larger plan for these two sites, so I thought it was appropriate.
For the record, Commissioner Wagner largely covered the ground I was going to cover, but Mr. Green is correct in that the 07 variance for the rear lot approved a 15-foot wide access. The variance was to reduce the width of access from 20 feet to 15 feet in Sasko Hill on the condition that the existing house, the front lot, share the access, which would, the change to the plan would require that this existing driveway be eliminated and that this house here would have access off this common driveway within that 15-foot strip.
You know what? You just reminded me of another question.
I hate when that happens.
Well, wasn't there a public comment on a prior application? I believe it was on the adjacent parcel on the corner, where the occupants of the single family on Sasko Hill asked for there to be the row of trees, and the applicant had promised to put those in. And isn't that what we're seeing now in the median?
That house is one removed from this house.
One removed.
Yeah.
Okay.
And the trees have been planted.
But that's not what we're seeing on this drawing.
No, there are trees in this location as shown.
As shown.
Yes.
So if they were to build a driveway according to the language of the variance, they'd have a problem now with the trees.
No, I don't think that would be correct.
Okay.
There was required to be planting implemented, whether it be on the northerly or the southerly side of the driveway. Either way would be in conformance with the ZBA condition, in my opinion.
Got it.
And my clients and I would suggest that a fair reading of the variance was that the plantings would be along the northerly boundary of the property between the so-called residential use and the design commercial district. So it's my client's position that these plantings between the purported driveways or even to the south of this driveway are inconsistent with the variance, and that a fair reading of the variance and review of the application that was before the ZBA was that the plantings were to be between the residential lots and the design commercial.
To screen the residential driveway from the commercial establishment.
Correct.
And just to cut this discussion short, that's really not an issue we have any jurisdiction over. That's a ZBA zoning enforcement issue. If a variance was granted by the ZBA, and in fact, what was constructed is not in conformance with it, that would be an issue for Mr. Decker, our zoning enforcement.
Well, it would be the
for them.
ZBA. You would
And
ask
or
the ZBA whether or not that's meeting their requirement or not.
And I may touch on that issue again just momentarily, if I may, but I think that's a fair position. So I provided the commission with some documents, including section 25. And I should also note for the record that in the agenda and in the notices, this has been referred to as a special exception. It is, however, actually a special permit pursuant to section 25. And I've provided the commission with that section of the regulation, section 25. And the requirements for an application under section 25.2 at 25.2.2.1 include property lines having exact distances, angles, bearings, and so forth. And the next document, and I will get back to the regulation, but you'll see that I've provided you with a map that is a 1980 map that was prepared for Kenneth Tull and Robert Ovens. And what this shows are the two lots, and the front lot is referred to as B1, the front lot being the lot that's predominantly on Route 1, and the so-called flag lot or rear lot is B2. So you'll see the approximately 20-foot wide extension of Lot B2 that runs along the westerly border of Lot B1 to Route 1. And you'll see actually the zone line sort of cuts off where what I will call the flagpole meets the flag there. And, but that is actually a single flag-shaped piece of property, Lot B2, and B1 is the property, the larger portion of which is the subject of this application. The next document is a warranty deed, which is at volume 2404, page 064 of the Fairfield Land Records. And by that deed, Tull, Ovens, and Ovens conveyed Lot B2, or the flag lot, to the applicant 22 Post Road Fairfield LLC. The next document is the deed pursuant to which the lot known as B1 was conveyed by Mary Louise Tull in the estate of Mary, and I'm not even going to try that one, Grezgorzuski. That was conveyed to 2291 Post Road. So those are the two warranty deeds that convey the property that is depicted in this map. Now, significantly, the next deed is volume 4143282. And by that deed, apparently 2291 Post Road Fairfield LLC purported to convey what I will call the flagpole portion, or the western portion of Lot B2. They purported to convey it to Lot B1. However, that really, there's an error, or I'm not quite sure how this happened, but you'll note that Schedule A to this deed, to the quitclaim deed, the metes and bounds of the property that were conveyed was, first of all, northerly by the Post Road, 20.91 feet. And I refer you again to this map, and if you follow with me on the map that I've provided you, you'll see that it is 20.91 feet on the Post Road. The next dimension is easterly. It is bound by Lot 209.1, by Lot B1, 209.12 feet. And you'll see the dimension of that common boundary between the flagpole portion and Lot B1 is, in fact, 209.12. Now, the problem begins on the next dimension, which shows 20.91 feet by Lot B2. And then it's bounded westerly by 190.46. Now, if you look at this map, it appears to form a trapezoid. But what happens is the easterly boundary is 209.12 feet, but the westerly boundary is actually only 190.46 feet. Therefore, it's actually, the property that was conveyed is not a trapezoid, but it's shorter on the western boundary. So, in other words, this property line that was purported to be created here, actually this boundary ends here, and if you look at some of the dimensioned drawings that the applicant has submitted, and specifically this site plan, and I'm referring to sheet 1 of 4, here is your 190.46 dimension.
Hold on a second. What sheet?
Sheet 1 of 4, lot line revision.
Yeah.
You'll see that the distance from the Post Road to this boundary line, actually, the element of this property is 190.46. So what happened was, I believe there was an error in the conveyance, so that the western boundary, rather than conveying the entire portion of the flagpole, they were 20 feet short on that western boundary.
So they're coming in 20 feet
Short.
into the subject property. They failed to convey 20 feet
Correct.
within the subject property on the flagpole?
So that the conveyance ends here at 190.46 on the western boundary, whereas the eastern boundary ended up here, right here.
So it's just not congruous. I mean, the meets and bounds simply don't add up.
So that the meets and bounds don't add up, and the lot, that is B1, is actually larger than it is depicted on your applications and in the site plans. And therefore, the actual property that is the subject of this application is larger, and the calculations as to coverage and FAR and all that sort of thing, while admittedly the lot is actually larger, the calculations are not accurate, and the lot that is depicted in the site plan is not accurate. Now, it's actually larger.
It's depicted as smaller than what it really is.
It's depicted as smaller than it really
Because
is.
the line, if I'm understanding you correctly, on the subject lot, the easterly edge is depicted correctly, but the shaded area of that orange on the map, right, that's up on the display right now, actually comes down a little bit further.
I'm going to submit a document that I just drew, a portion of a triangle that was not conveyed, that was purported to be conveyed. And I'll, in that commission, you can go into the record. I don't know, I can mark it as, the chairman, would you like me to mark this as?
No, we stand over here.
Okay, great, thank you.
And just to be clear, I mean, not that I'm agreeing with your proposed, your arguments necessarily. I just want to make sure that we all understand exactly what it is that you're articulating.
Right. Are you suggesting that the square footage calculated on the map submitted by the applicant is inaccurate?
No, I'm submitting that the square foot calculations are inaccurate. I'm submitting that of the overall parcel of land that includes this application. Now, the applicant may argue, well, it's the same owner. So we were conveying property to ourselves, basically, so it's of no matter. I would suggest that they went to the trouble of filing a quitclaim deed to convey property from themselves to themselves. In other words, Lot B2, to create this other lot.
So the little triangle that you've shaded in blue on this submission that you've just given us, it's your contention that the shaded area in blue was not conveyed
Correct.
by the 2008 quitclaim deed.
Correct.
And therefore, the plans that have been submitted
B2.
are not accurate.
Correct. In that. Correct. Therefore, the applicant calculated a higher number of square feet on its parcel than actually it has title to.
I believe that the lot is actually larger. Yeah. The lot is smaller, I suppose.
The lot is
Smaller.
You're suggesting the colored triangle was not properly conveyed to the applicant, and they do not own what they're making application.
Well, they own it, but it's not part of that lot.
In other words,
Based on a deed versus the drawing you submitted.
based upon the deed and the drawing.
And is the effect of that they have a drawing that includes a triangle of property that they do not own? Or is your argument that the calculations for square footage for the building is too big because the lot is smaller than they believe it to be? Just so I'm clear on this. I'm not sure.
What's the effective impact?
I'm not sure the relevance
I'm
of it.
thinking that the property is, their property line extends past what they're proposing, and they haven't included that in it. They actually have more square footage that's being proposed here.
And also that this triangle, the other part of my argument is that this triangle right here
based on the map that is before you, this triangle right here is still part of this lot. There's a slice here that was not conveyed at any point and is now being dedicated to a residential use, which is also non-conforming.
So what you're actually saying is they've given up their property for the road?
I don't know, but I'm just saying there's some inaccuracies in the conveyances, and I question the calculations on square footage and dimensions.
So it just falls on the...
I leave that to
Your
the...
point is that you're saying it falls because it fails to meet the requirement of accurate.
Correct.
That's
Correct.
It's technical, but it's not really a matter of the calculations or larger impact. It just doesn't meet the test of accuracy.
Correct. The next issue relates to 25.2.2.2, and we have gotten... This is an issue that I also raised on the One Sasco application. I'm going back to Section 25, and it requires that an application and site plans contain existing contour lines on the premises and proposed contour lines. And at no time in this town has that become more important after the events of August 28th and Hurricane Irene, and understanding the elevations on property, particularly where there's a CAM application involved. And it doesn't just require the contour lines on this property, but it requires the contour lines on an area within 50 feet of the premises all the way around. And that's obviously so that this commission can understand really where the water's flowing and how the water's flowing. I mean, you're looking at certain drainage structures and that sort of thing. And I understand that this is in an area that appears to be very level. But your regulations don't say contour lines only where it's sloped, hilly, or elevations exceed 5 degrees. They say that you must put in proposed and existing contour lines. And I understand, and I have tremendous respect for Mr. Hammonds, and I know he'll tell you that he likes using spot elevations, but that is simply not what your regulations require. Again, 25.2.7 refers to a zone legend describing all data pertaining to all applicable design requirements. I would submit that based, again, on some issues on these conveyances, that the data, the zoning data, and the ratios and percentages are inaccurate. And again, they may be skewed because the lot is larger. Maybe those ratios improve for this applicant. But I would submit that there is evidence that they are not accurate, regardless of whether that error is favorable or unfavorable.
Just to be clear on that point, that's based upon your assessment of the conveyancing and deeds, and not based upon an error in the plan submitted. If the lines are correct in the plan submitted, and your arguments about the deeds are not correct, then do you take issue with the calculations in the in the plans?
I do, because it would be the applicant's position that the deeds dictate the land which is conveyed, and that the deeds are dispositive of what has been conveyed between property owners.
No, well, my question presumed that, okay, and asked you if you know,
I believe that this, what I would call this triangle, and I'm depicting along the, basically that the lot line runs basically along the zone line to that point where that triangle was that I drew. And I actually think that I may have drawn that in reverse. The triangle that I drew was not conveyed, and therefore I believe that this applicant owns this triangle, this area in here, is owned by this applicant and is not depicted on this site as being owned by this applicant. The applicant purports to show the boundary line based on surveys, that this is the boundary line right here. I believe that the actual lot line runs along the zoning line to this point and then meets this boundary line right here.
well, then you should submit a new exhibit, because that's not what you submitted.
It's my position that that was not conveyed. Therefore, that is still owned by B2. Was I unclear on that?
Well, your shaded triangle is on the subject lot, and the triangle that you just pointed out to us is on the residential lot behind it.
There's a triangle here,
Yeah?
and then the boundary line ended here, and this part was conveyed. Therefore, this B1 has, and I'm going to show the boundary line runs to here
Yep.
and then to here. Therefore, this area is actually part of Lot B1.
And the exhibit that you submitted had a triangle that's in the orange shading, not the other way around.
But if that's the case, section 25.2.2.1 requires a drawing to have property lines delineating the land to be used under the application.
Correct.
So therefore, while there may be an issue regarding this portion of the land in here,
Yeah.
that in fact, your triangle comes out, the fact is this applicant is not using that land for purposes of this. So what is the relevance, if any, of that?
Because this land is now, I believe, purported to be, one relevance is it's in a design commercial district. It's purported to now be used by this house for access to a residential use, and a design commercial district does not allow residential use in a design commercial district for a two-story house.
But then again, that's not necessarily an issue before us if someone, that's a zoning enforcement issue, if in fact they've delineated something.
It's not a violation.
It's not a violation.
Or a I don't.
You're not permitted to have access through a residential zone to a commercial zone. The reverse is not true. That's how the access is now, through a commercial zone to the residential.
I mean, I don't think we're going to resolve this until we get back to the applicant. I mean, I think it's good for Mr. Green to make his points about what he's proposing, but I mean, we've got a lot line revision application in front of us, and I would expect the applicant to be able to answer what's on their application and what's not, and I think Mr. Green could just point out what he believes are the inaccuracies.
I'm in agreement with you. I just want to understand what he claims is the inaccuracy, because what he submitted in that exhibit was a shaded triangle right there, okay? And what I thought he said was that shading right there was not conveyed.
May I see that?
I think it's done there.
And I want to make sure I understand the argument.
Mr. Wendt.
The difference in the drawing, all of this map, property line is coincident with the zone line. So the triangle that Mr. Green points out falls above the zone line but below the property line for the commercial.
So it's actually bigger than the blue triangle.
So it's in here. But I'm assuming they're going to be able to address that.
Okay.
There's, the confusion is the line that's shown as the property line in the 1980 map is coincident with this zone line.
And not the property line that's shown in the plan. Gotcha.
Yeah.
Gotcha.
Thank you, Mr. Wendt.
Which is why you say it was not conveyed.
Correct.
Because the other was.
Correct.
And so that little slice there in the corner remained with people.
Correct.
Thank you very much.
That error also creates a condition where, again, just for the record, creates a condition where the access to the rear lot arguably does not have 15 feet on lot B2, but we can talk about that another day. And again, that's a zoning compliance issue. Okay. Going to the requirements for approval in section 25.7. Again, 25.7.2 requires, and 25.7 says that the town shall approve an application for special permit for the establishment of a special permit use that finds that the proposed use and proposed buildings and structures conform to the standards applicable in the district in which the special permit use is to be located, and medical buildings are certainly permitted. Conform to any applicable special standards for special exception. I don't know that any of those are applicable. And conform to the following additional requirements. And your regulations at 25.7.2, again, specifically require as a condition of approval that you have existing and proposed contours. Another issue is the driveways, the design of the site and the driveways into the site. And where's the best place? A specific requirement, and I provided you with section, the materials that I provided to you is 2811.2, which is standards for parking, driveways, and that sort of thing. And the first thing is 28.11.2.5, and that's on page 104. And again, I took actually, if you're using the book, that's on page 94 of the book if you're using the zoning regulations booklet as opposed to the internet. But I provided you with that page. But on page 94 of the regulations, 28.11.2 has standards, and they're deemed to be minimum standards in the design of parking areas and so forth. And the first one is 28.11.2.5. Curb radii at street shall be 15 feet. Obviously, one of the concerns of my client relates to safety and the proximity of the driveways to Sasko Hill Road, and the radius into the site, these are only 5-foot radius and not 15-foot radius. That becomes, again, I'm referring to the access on the post road. You'll see those are 5-foot radius turns. An issue that arises is that there is only 13 feet from the property line to the proposed driveway, so there's not enough room for a 15-foot radius curve the way the driveway is laid out.
Which sheet?
I'm on sheet 2 of 4.
Yeah. So, you see 10 foot, if you come up on the upper left-hand corner there?
This is a 5-foot radius here and a 5-foot radius here.
Is that a calculation that you made, or is that a calculation that's shown on
It's a calculation I made using my scale, which has been...
Just explain briefly how you made your calculation.
Well, I measured the radius. I measured the distance between the beginning of the curve. It's a 20 scale drawing.
Yeah.
And you get to a point that's 90 degrees and measure it, and it shows, actually, mine shows slightly smaller than a 5-foot radius.
So on the plan itself, there's no radius.
No, it's not mentioned on the plan. However, one of the concerns was that traffic picks up a lot of speed. We are concerned with the narrow site. We are concerned with the speed of traffic on Route 1 and the impact of cars trying to get into this site. And certainly one of the ideas of having a larger radius is that cars can take a longer, easier turn than a sort of a sharp turn into the driveway. But I would submit that they can't get a 15-foot radius on that side without moving the driveway over 2 feet, because there's not enough room for a 15-foot radius on this site with the driveway where it is. And that's because this driveway is only 13 feet off the boundary line. Next is this driveway, which is a two-way drive, which I just figured out tonight when Mr. Hammonds was speaking, when he said that trucks and the like could get in and out. This is not 24 feet wide, so therefore it violates section 28.11.2.1 in that it is not wide enough into the entry. And then and I note that the chair was sort of onto this issue early on, and while it is correct, I'm interested in this issue. While it is correct that a loading space is not required because it doesn't have a retail use, it is significant, and I've provided you with a copy of section 28.5, and that's, again, if you're looking at the internet, it's page 97. If you're looking in the regulations, it's page 87. And it's significant to me that in the regulation, 28.5, loading spaces have to have a vertical clearance of 15 feet. And that's because somebody figured out that commercial vehicles come in all sizes, and while I appreciate Mr. Hammond's comments about FedEx, I spoke to a FedEx driver who said that his truck says 11 feet, but he believes it's actually 10.6, 10.5, 10 and a half feet, but they tell them 11 to avoid any unfortunate incidents. But you'll see that the page that I provided you with, an excerpt that I got off the internet, frankly, from Budget, which shows some pretty typical moving trucks. A 16-foot moving truck has a clearance of 11 feet 6 inches, and you can see sort of what that looks like. And I have this page in your materials. And the larger 24-foot moving truck has a vertical clearance of 13 feet 6 inches. I spoke to the fire marshal, and I disagree with Mr. Hammonds in that I was informed that the height of ladder truck 1 is 11 feet and ladder truck 2 is 12 feet in our town. And I would suggest that the traffic pattern, first of all, the openings right now as they're proposed are 10'8", which is obviously too low because trucks and the like, again, you don't have to have a loading space, but I think it's a fair interpretation of your regulations when you require that a loading space have 15 feet of clearance. I think it's a fair interpretation of your regulations that moving trucks, when doctors or medical uses move in and out, when furniture arrives, when trucks arrive, and the like, I think it's a fair interpretation that there should be circulation throughout a site of at least 15 feet somewhere on the site for vehicles to clear. And I would submit that on any given day when a delivery arrives and it happens to come in a large truck, whether it's a piece of x-ray equipment, or I don't know, whatever's being delivered randomly, I don't know, furniture, I think that the site flow is really inappropriate in the sense that you can't drive a truck of that height to circulate on the site. There is really no stop point. If a truck pulls here, then I think that potentially cars could not come out from under the building. This is one way, and certainly from a safety standpoint, I don't know where would a fire truck go or the like trying to enter this site. I don't know, but a ladder truck coming into the site, I don't know, but a ladder truck, certainly a ladder truck pulling into the back of the site can't come out of the site without backing out in a one-way, against a one-way sign, which I don't think is desirable in terms of good planning and development. Section 28.10, which is on page 93 of the regulations, requires that any off-street parking which extends 10 feet or more under all or any portion of a building shall be enclosed. And it requires that if you have basically parking under a building, that it should be enclosed and that the facade of the building, it should be the same as the facade of the building, and it should not be open to view. And it appears that the elevations of the building are not in conformity with that. I don't know. 28.10 requires that.
Enclosure, except for single-family houses and flood zones, regulations require breakaway walls, off-street parking or loading areas which extend 10 feet or more shall be enclosed.
So you're interpreting the drawings as having parking spaces which extend 10 feet or more under
the building,
all or a portion of the building?
These parking spaces
are completely under the building. Parking spaces depicted here are entirely beneath the building.
The handicap parking.
And 2 spaces next to the handicap are entirely beneath the building. And the other spaces don't extend 5 feet under the building, but the point is that this is all open area. These will back, it says open to parking. It is accurate. These will all be parked cars. Look, these are design standards in your regulations, and I'm just, these are the requirements. I'm not sure what the specific logic was when that was adopted, but.
I'm not criticizing
No.
the argument, I'm just asking you to articulate it so that we can all understand it. And that's all, to point out what you're basing your argument on.
Just to sort of bear with me for one moment.
So you're suggesting that because there are parking spaces which are fully under the building, that the 20.10.1 requires that it be fully enclosed, et cetera.
Correct.
Just so I'm clear, are you suggesting it's enclosed on the side adjacent to the cars parked under the building? Or that our requirement requires the other side also be enclosed?
I'm going to leave
Therefore,
that,
effectively eliminating all those parking spaces that are drive-out spaces.
I would suggest that the language says that where there are parking spaces under the building, or that extend under a building, that the parking underground, the sub-building parking is to be enclosed. And so I leave that to the commission.
It's not sub-buildings.
So, referring to 25.7.7, which, again, as page 75 of your regulations, 25.7.
We have different versions, so the section is fine.
I should
I have the green covered version, so it's a different page.
Page 86.
I think mine the same on the blue.
What section are we on?
25.77. 21? 25.77.
The green is the new one. Sorry. It's the most recent.
There you go.
You like the old one? You know, and I have moved to the new.
Yes, we have.
Yes,
Apologize.
2577.
I have the internet version, which is current as of today, so as far as I know. So, page 86. So, 25.7.7.
It's on page 75.
There's no need to point out where my cudgel lies.
All right. Well, anyways, I provided you with a copy of it anyways. So the point is that the applicant has not demonstrated, certainly it's our position that the applicant has not demonstrated that this particular application, that the design of this building harmonizes in any way with the Sasko Hill neighborhood. There's no indication that it accomplishes a transition in character between areas of unlike character, and they are areas of unlike character in the sense that this is a commercial area, commercial district on Route 1, designed commercial district, and it is proximate to a residential district. We're not satisfied that having this tall building, and by the way, at the last session, we really didn't talk about it much today, but the roof utilities are visible from a distance. They are visible from properties in the neighborhood. And there's no basis upon which this commission can find that property values are protected in the neighborhood. Again, I understand that this only deals with this particular site, this lot B1, but we have significant concerns on safety. We have significant concerns of these driveways that are created as a result of this project. Certainly, the way this project is laid out There are concerns with traffic and congestion and cars that would have to stop quickly to enter into this particular driveway. We would submit that the drives within the site are insufficient, that traffic would back up there. There's nothing, as far as my clients are concerned, that this to indicate that this application preserves and enhances the appearance and beauty of our community. Again, we envision a larger sort of a broader view of this area. And I understand, and I've discussed with the applicant the possibility of trying to get neighbors together to try to create more of a village-type development, a larger development, a development that would satisfy so many of our concerns in terms of how sites are laid out, their appearance, their safety from a traffic standpoint, their scale, and avoiding, again, undue traffic congestion. I would submit that there are a number of defects in this application. Again, I don't know that this commission can waive requirements such as, again, and I hate to harp about contour lines, but I want to emphasize again, we learned a lot about the importance of contour lines in the last month and the flow of water and the accumulation of water and flooding. And your regulations are fairly rigid in terms of requiring those kinds of things in your applications and in your approvals. And on that basis, the Sasko Hill Neighborhood Association urges you to deny this application. I don't know if you have any questions.
You talk about the gateway into Fairfield from the west side of town.
Correct.
It's my understanding we have a dilapidated old building on the corner. We have an empty lot. And
Correct.
now we have an empty car dealership.
Correct.
So I'm trying to figure out how a building like this doesn't harmonize with the neighborhood, considering what's there now. And it seems, I'm trying to figure out what you and Mr. Hack and the Sasko Hill neighborhood really want for this property.
Well, in a perfect world, what I was emphasizing is it seems a shame to take an area that is the gateway into town and to divide it into small sites with a series of congested driveways in what has become a high-traffic area.
Don't we have one driveway going into the post road?
We have
Not three?
We have three driveways in close proximity to each other, potentially. The driveway for the car dealership is actually located.
Right.
There's a driveway right there.
But don't we have a
There's
driveway right now?
There was a driveway proposed not a month ago
Right.
there.
Right.
There's a traffic light here.
Correct.
There are significant traffic counts on the post road. So,
Isn't that all along the post road that we encounter that? I mean.
yeah, that's right. It's
Okay,
all
now,
along the post
don't we
road.
also have a driveway on this property now?
I'm sorry?
Isn't there already a driveway on this property now that leads to the back?
There is a driveway that serves a residential structure on this property. But if there is going to be a driveway, it certainly has to meet your regulations.
No, I understand that completely. It just seems to me, I don't understand why we're attacking 25.7.7, considering what's there now.
Well, your suggestion is then that anything is an improvement.
No, I'm not saying that. What I'm saying is that, you know, I'm sure there is issues that have to be resolved regarding this property and this building. But, I mean, you're considering the building not to be in harmony with the neighborhood. I'm just trying to see what your argument is
Look,
regarding that.
as far as I'm concerned, I think you touch on an important point, and that is that anyone and everyone has the right to develop their property as they please in conformity with the zoning regulations. We may not like it, and I know frequently this commission is presented with applications, and while it may not be your particular choice for a particular property or your particular view or vision, either as a commission or personally for a particular use of property, if it conforms to your regulations and meets the standards and meets the plan, then it's something that should be approved. And I understand that. It's not about what we want and what we don't want. Now,
But aren't you just stating that in your last argument, that this is not what you want for the property? You want a village-like setting for the property?
well, when I refer to a village-like setting, I'm referring to sort of a modern form of development that's springing up all over Connecticut, and that is, those are properties that are consolidated and developed into a so-called village development, which brings a sort of a variety of sizes of retail uses, restaurant uses, a variety of uses that are permitted under your regulations, consolidates them into a single site with a comprehensive traffic plan, a comprehensive site plan for parking, and makes efficient use of properties by combining smaller properties into a larger scale development. Now, I understand that we can't force any applicant to do this, nor would we propose to do that. But it is a vision. It is something that we should strive to do. And again, I recognize the efforts of this commission in trying to innovate and trying to adapt and trying to create incentives for appropriate development in Fairfield. And I guess what I'm saying to you is our motivation may be that we are not enamored with the notion of putting a medical building on this narrow site and plunking it in and having a series of small developments plunked in along Route 1. And we would like to see a larger scheme, a larger vision. And it is perhaps that is motivating us. But when we look at this plan, we recognize that it doesn't meet the standards in your regulations and that it should be denied because it doesn't meet those standards. So I guess we're talking about motivation on one hand, and we're talking about reasons why a plan should be denied on the other.
Mr. Green, just real quickly, this application obviously is going to rise and fall on the merits of this application. I understand that. But since Mr. Hack and you have discussed this larger vision idea, and you mentioned this whole business of, or compared it to the pie eating contest and then more pie, my thought is one of the ways to digest that pie better is to have someone help cook it, or bake it, I should say. And what I mean by that is that other neighborhood associations have come before this commission, and they have spent the time researching and looking and trying to work with us as a true partner and looked at areas that are comparable. I mean, at core, I think the problem here, and you see some of the frustration with, in the comments by Commissioner Alessi, are that the cost of owning these properties, these commercial properties, are such that what you get these 2 pounds of bologna in a 1 pound bag because the property owner is struggling to find a way to get value out of what they're being charged for taxes and everything else. So all I'd say is it's just on this larger issue of vision, and we'll see how this rises and falls when we decide in an executive session, but on this larger issue, it does strike me that it's incumbent on the neighbors, this has been done in Greenfield Hill and in Stratfield Village and other places, to look at what are the designs and also what are the economic realities that will work. Otherwise, you are going to be back endlessly fighting the same fight, which is it's too big on a site that's too small. But I will tell you that other groups, and you have been before us, I think, well, you may have represented groups that came before us, have offered that and helped us as a starting point for that. So, but to ask the commission to do that is at this stage.
And I can tell you that we greatly appreciate that comment. I can tell you that we are anxious to join you in that dialogue.
But we need somewhere to start that dialogue, and if there's raw material provided, as was done in other examples of other neighborhood associations, that can then be tasked to the commission.
And we're happy to undertake that task and to take those steps. And I know I speak on behalf of the entire Sasko Hill Neighborhood Association. We actually talked about this last week as perhaps retaining a consultant and bringing some data to the commission.
And not to beat this to death, but I mean, one of the keys for us is the need for predictability. You cannot ask owners to come before us again and again who think that they are meeting the requirements, and then they have to wonder whether or not what they're doing is predictable. Now, there's going to be judgment calls, but they need it's clear that there's got to be some sort of standards that are going to work.
Right.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Is there any further members of the public who wish to comment? And again, those members of the public who are part of the association, I have to ask you to be very brief because you have counsel representing you here.
If I could just to follow up again, my name is Hank Heck, and just to address the question that you raised, Commissioner, in terms of what the objective is we definitely take a view that the neighborhood is broader than that commercial strip just along Post Road. And we see that these recent proposals for development do not harmonize with the broader neighborhood. And that's one of our concerns, is that as developers move forward, that they're cognizant of the residential character of the neighborhood that they abut.
Thank you, Mr. Heck. Any further public comment?
Oh,
no, not yet, not yet.
Hi, I'm Stanley Morton, 290 Sasko Hill Road, and I have just a brief question that I think I would pose to myself if I were a commissioner, which is, the intent behind the connection between parking spaces and the size of the building. And I wonder if at the time that relationship was established, it was anticipated that in the future, people would build buildings on stilts to create parking spaces below to maximize the size of the building above. And I don't presume that you have an answer tonight, but I would certainly, in your place, want to better understand what the intent of the relationship between parking spaces and size of building was. And do we really want, in the context of all that has been said, to line the post road in this part of Fairfield with buildings like this one after another, on stilts, and deal with the implications of having done that? Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Moore. Final comment. Come on up, Pam.
Hi, good evening. My name is Maisie Stanovich, and I live at 114 Beaumont Street, and I'm actually here representing my mom, Lucy Stanovich, who lives at 57 Sasko Hill Road, and my aunt, Sophie Mills, who lives at 73 Sasko Hill Road. And just something that Mr. Green did not touch upon, but I, who have grown up in that neighborhood and do a lot of walking, running, jogging on the bicycle, etc., one of my concerns is the fact that this building is basically on stilts and there's a parking garage underneath. I just question, what's it going to be like at nighttime? I mean, the building itself can be locked down, but the garage is open. Will there be lights on all night long? In which case, if you're driving by the post road at night, you're going to be able to look right into this empty garage, and that's not really a pretty sight to see if you're on the post road or you're walking by. But from a safety issue, I, as a woman, even walking with my dog, if I'm going to walk that area of the post road and it's dark, that doesn't make me feel real safe either. So I just wanted to bring up that point because, again, it wasn't really mentioned, and I think that since this type of building is not that common in town, as far as being right on the post road and also just having this big parking area underneath, I feel that we really need to kind of consider the safety issues. And again, I had also felt that with a fire truck, and since I have the two properties that are so close to this building, if this building did catch on fire, I don't really feel secure that the town of Fairfield would have an easy time with the fire trucks, et cetera, to take care of that problem. So, thank you very much.
Thank you, Ms. Sinovich. Any final comment? Hearing none, Mr. Jankowski. Your rebuttal.
Mr. Hammond would just like to address one item.
Good evening. I appreciate Mr. Green's, again, very detailed analysis in view of the special permit application. Mr. Jankowski will speak to the issue of the triangles and the accurate measurements of square footage and such. There's two things I'd like to just speak to. One is the radii of the access, the curb cuts, when you come in. And the regulation is 28.5, I believe. I have it here, but I misplaced it. 28 points.
2811.
Yes, thank you. 2011.
104, maybe. That's section 28.11.2.
Thank you.
On page 104 of the hard copy.
Which I managed to misplace.
Did I copy this?
And it says curb radii, 28.11.2.5, curb return radii at a street shall be 15 feet, open parentheses, or subject to specifications determined by the town engineer to meet field conditions, close parentheses. The reason those parentheses are there is very important. I'm just going to show you. Let's say that we have a 12-foot driveway, like that, and we have a 15-foot radius, like that, and we have a 15-foot radius like that. What was it? We have 15 feet here, 12 feet here, 15 feet here. 15, 30, 42 feet. We have 42-foot
Mr.
curb
Hammond?
cut.
You can't use pencil, or whatever, you can't use.
Yellow's not a great color.
Yeah.
I'll do this. Here's your driveway. 12 feet. There's your radius, 15 feet. There's your radius, 15 feet. You have 15 feet here to here, 12 feet, 15 feet here to here. What you have is a 30 plus 12, a 42-foot curb cut for a driveway. That's a single plane. It's a private airplane coming in. We don't do that. And we don't do that because it doesn't make sense. So what we do is we cut the tangents. We simply move this over. So what happens is that the radius is still nice and wide, nice and easy to turn into, but it doesn't start at 90 degrees. It starts here. So the curb cut, generally for a single driveway, 20 feet, 24 feet, that type of thing. Similarly for the curb cut onto the post road, for the commercial building, for the medical building. This has been worked out between Laura Pulley, I don't really know her title, she's a PE with the town, many times for many site plans that we've developed, exactly how to get the cars in and out on the post road in such a way that they're not frozen in queues of trying to make narrow turns and go too slow. Mr. Green is absolutely correct. You want things to flow. You don't want people to get frozen up. So in this particular case, that's why that was drawn that particular way.
Did the town engineer then approve the smaller radius?
Not in writing, but we reviewed it together, yes, on both occasions.
Yeah, essentially, they're not in any of her comments. She reviewed.
State DOT requires a permit because it's a state highway, and it will be the ultimate arbiter in the design of the.
But the town engineering department has reviewed the plans.
Okay, and approved the smaller radii?
Yeah.
Exactly. It did come in our discussion. Just so you know, the iterative process is I will come up with general ideas and site plans. I'll go meet with either Bill Hurley or Laura Pulley, and we'll hash out different items, different concerns. Their concerns are generally the anecdotal drainage problems. There's one catch basin that, gosh darn, doesn't work. Let's take advantage of it right now to fix it. Mr. Devanchik is absolutely correct. It's a state road. The DOT tells us what our radii will be for that road, not us. And with that, Mr. Jankowski.
On a small, that was a small drawing, if that's what you're looking for.
That one right there. That's what one he was using.
Oh, yeah.
Talk about the shaded triangle on the back lot.
It was over here he was pointing. It was here,
Right
here.
there.
Right there, Mr. I think that's where they were talking.
Needless to say, both of these properties are owned by the applicant. 2291 Post Road, Fairfield, LLC. What happened was, when we deeded this access way to this lot, it was the conveyor and the conveyee were the same entity. Thereafter, when Barry Hammond went to zoning, it was suggested that we should just make the property line the zone line. I mean, this is these properties have 3 zones mishmashed together here. So what he did was he made the property line here. If you would like, you can approve this with the condition that I deed this back to the residential, or deed it away from B1. Doesn't affect anything. Every map calculation that you have is on this piece and on this boundary line. And I will tell you tomorrow, I will prepare a quitclaim deed, and I will deed this triangle back to the residential lot. It's meaningless. It's a red herring. And I will do that. You can make it a condition if you approve this.
Okay.
But it has nothing to do with any inaccuracy. The same entity owns the entire piece. Secondly, on the access way, we have a variance to use the 15-foot right-of-way to get out to Sasko Hill Road for this. We did that purely to give this piece more parking, more an even flow for traffic, to get rid of this 20-foot strip, which was actually owned by this. And by the way, it was mentioned that you can't go over a commercial piece to get to residential. This had received a variance, I don't know, 30 years ago for that. Otherwise, they wouldn't have been able to build this house in this rear lot. In regard to the driveways on Sasko Hill Road, we would be more than happy to have one driveway. Problem is, and we keep going back to one of the neighbors about the trees. We say, okay, we're going to plant the trees here. No, I want whatever. So we went to zoning and we planted the trees, which now are essentially on the zone line, and it screens everything just as well as it would have on the other side of the access way. We also went back to zoning and they said, well, you know, it might be a little tough turn in here. Maybe you should have another driveway. We don't want to put another driveway. We want one driveway. And I'm sure the neighbors on Sasko Hill want one driveway for the duplex and this house, which is also owned by Mr. Christian. So I don't think...
Why put two driveways in?
Just because of the plantings and being able to get to the garage, it was a tough turn, but we could work that out. It's not a problem. And that would be in conformance with zoning. We've always gone back to ZBA or the zoning department for advice on this. It's not like, you know, we're trying to not do anything. We're just trying to accommodate everybody. So I think that takes care of the few issues which Mr. Green raised. In regard to the application,
Commissioner Wagner wasn't interested on this point.
Yeah, thanks. So, Mr. Green is correct that the property line as described in the plans here is not accurate?
no, he's incorrect. It is accurate.
It is accurate?
Yeah.
All right. And I'm not trying to be argumentative here, I just really want to be clear. Because I thought I heard you say that if we wanted to require you to deed back that triangle back to the residential lot, that you would do that.
Yes.
And it appears on the plan as though that triangle is already part of the residential lot.
What happened was, Barry Hammond went to zoning, talked to Jim. They said it would be really neat if we made it on the zone line. Probably my fault for not doing a quick line deed for that triangle. But it doesn't affect the application.
I realize that. I realize your argument.
I will feed that back.
Okay. As it stands today, that triangle is owned by the commercial lot that's the subject of the application. Okay. All right.
Same owner.
Right.
This application conforms or exceeds all of the zoning rules, regulations, and requirements. It's in conformance with the master plan. It conforms or exceeds parking, traffic, landscaping, lighting, There is no ingress or egress on Sasko Hill Road. Doesn't abut Sasko Hill Road. It's an extremely conservative use for a design commercial district. It's a medical building. It has the required parking. I don't think a lot of doctors work at nights. It's not retail. It's a medical building. Given all of the other uses you could put in a design commercial zone, this is a conservative use. And it's an appropriate use. What happened in regard to this, and by the way, to say that it's not transitional or not in harmony, we have a car dealership over here. Rumor has it there is another dealership going in there. And we have a rather unattractive building over here. I don't know, it's probably not in harmony because it looks too good for those two buildings, but it's an appropriate design and use. What really is going on here, and from the comments, well, would you consider a mutual driveway, or wouldn't it be nice if one owner owned all these properties? 7 years ago, we came before this commission, and you granted a 10,000 square foot building. No opposition. No opposition. That didn't get built because of the economy. Apparently, nowadays, only doctors can afford to have buildings like this. So what we did was increase the size of the lot, downsize the building. This is an appropriate development. But what happened was, the last time we were here, just so happens that our neighbors were in on an application next door, a rather ambitious application, which got denied. And somehow we have become responsible for solving the corner pieces traffic problems. We're probably going to be held accountable by the Sasko Hill Association, and that's just completely unfair and unreasonable and probably illegal. But that's the way it is. That's the luck of the draw, and that's what happened to us. But your charge is to just look at our application. We're not here to solve the corner pieces property so they could get more development. We've owned this property for a number of years, and we have a right to develop it in accordance with the rules and regulations. And this is a good application. There's no retail. There won't be anybody there at night. There's no stray lighting like there is in the automobile dealership. It's appropriate and fair that this application be approved. Thank you.
Absent a motion, if someone wants to make a motion to go back into executive session. Seeing no motion, meeting.
Make a motion to
Do
go
you want to
into
do the softball? You want to do the softball? I think.
I'd like to make a motion to go back into executive session.
Commissioner Leslie has moved back into executive session. Commissioner
Oh,
Parker
I
has
can't
seconded.
second. I can't.
Oh, you can second that.
Can't second.
Commissioner,
I'll second if you want to steer.
thank you. Commissioner Canali, go back into executive session. We're now back in executive session. Are there any motions?
Make a motion to close the softball field for Sacred Heart Intercession.
Commissioner Leslie has moved that we approve 5151 Park Avenue, the special exception application of Sacred Heart.
Don't we have to vote to go back in this?
I'm sorry, let's vote to go back into executive session. All in favor of going back into executive session, signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed?
Nay.
Nay.
Okay, we're back in executive session. Are there any motions?
I think you need a 5-2 vote on that, right?
We have 5-2, didn't we? We have 2.
4-3, simple majority? Okay, well, I voted for it anyway.
Okay. Is there a motion?
I'd like to make a motion to propose the acceptance of the ball field at Sacred Heart University.
Then motion moved for acceptance of 51, to approve 5151 Park Avenue special exception application of Sacred Heart University pertaining to the construction of a softball stadium in an R3 zone. Is there a second?
I'll second it, yeah.
We're here.
This is seconded.
We're here.
Is there any discussion on this item?
Yeah,
Discuss?
Yeah. You know what, honestly, here's the thing. It's not that I don't want to chat it out, talk it out tonight. It seems okay, they're not, but you know what? That area is super sensitive, and I think we ought to at least go take a look, walk it, but I mean, on the merits, yeah, I was pretty comfortable with the questions I asked, but just to be, I just rather, I know, the guys, I don't think 2 weeks is going to blow their planting schedule and stuff. Let's just go down there. This is, those people up, where Jefferson is, they need to see me walking around. I can't just sign on. I can't. It's, I think we should, I'm thinking about it, we should wait.
The motion needs to be withdrawn and the executive session closed in order for that to happen, because now there's a motion on the table to approve, and if there's a vote taken up or down,
Right.
So.
Yeah, just withdraw. I think.
I'm willing to talk about it and potentially table my motion. I mean,
Yeah,
I
can we
wasn't,
just- I
I
know.
wasn't
I-
under
you know,
any
there's
rush
someone
to
else
approve
sort of-
it.
yeah.
I seconded it just
Yeah.
because, just to move things along.
Right.
I personally
Would you like
did.
me to withdraw my
No, I didn't hear anything opposed. That neighborhood comes out on every
They do go
single
nuts. I
Sacred
just-
Heart application, everything in that area. Nobody was here tonight. They're
Nobody was
involved
here supporting
citizens.
it
I
either.
assume their lack of involvement here was probably not lack of notice, but probably like
They are pretty careful, but.
everything at Sacred Heart, the church they came out, I mean,
Yeah.
so I don't really have an issue, but again, I'm also usually the advocate of waiting, we have time to decide these things.
Yeah.
You might want to walk it, maybe a condition comes to mind, so
I'd
I got no
prefer to
problem
wait.
with waiting.
I'd be honest.
just
I mean,
withdraw.
I prefer to wait.
Somebody should move, they go back on the table, I think.
He's asking to withdraw.
That's going to
I
withdraw
withdraw
your
my
motion.
motion.
Oh, yeah,
Is the
just-
second withdrawn as well?
I'll withdraw my second.
Yeah.
We have no
Move to
further
close the
business.
executive session.
We have no further business, so it is closed, and the meeting stands adjourned.
No, I want to say yes to you, but then it is like that. It is like, let me just say something. I'm telling you, who knows? Maybe, I'm sure the pool, they are like